Chapter 424. One should learn from one's mistakes. If one had to use countless lies to cover up a lie, it would be better to be honest from the beginning. After getting a new residence, the Empress generously gave the small building to Li Mu. This incident ended without any mishaps. However, Mr. May's behavior disappointed him. The two of them had such a deep friendship, but he actually fanned the flames in front of the Empress. Li Mu needed to reconsider their friendship. Li Mu was full of apologies to the Empress. The Empress was very good to him, and Li Mu seemed to be using her kindness to do whatever he wanted, ignoring her feelings. Even if he was favored, he couldn't be fearless. A relationship had to be maintained for a long time, and it had to be mutual. If he relied on her to do whatever he wanted, he would only end up with nothing. This was the conclusion that Li Mu had come to after observing countless relationships. Fortunately, the Empress was magnanimous and Lu Hanyan was tolerant. Baiyun Mountain. Main Peak. Li Qing looked at Lu Hanyan's melancholy expression and asked, "Sister, what's wrong?" Lu Hanyan sighed and said, "I'm a little regretful now." Li Qing asked, "What do you regret?" Lu Hanyan said, "How great would it have been if I had stayed with him in the North County." The next day outside Changle Palace. Mr. May and Shangguan Li stood outside the palace, occasionally glancing inside. Li Mu had walked into Changle Palace for 2 hours. He didn't know what he had to say to the Empress. They hadn't finished talking for 2 whole hours. Yesterday he wanted nothing more than to behead him. Today he was being lovey-dovey again. May Darren sighed. She had watched His Majesty grow up. She thought she understood His Majesty very well. However, she didn't know when it started, but she couldn't guess His Majesty's thoughts. In Changle Palace, Li Mu was actually playing airplane chess with the Empress. This was a game that Wan Wan and Xiaobai often played. They often used this game to decide who would sleep in Li Mu at night. The Empress was with them every day, and she had also learned this new form of entertainment. Li Mu took the initiative to admit his mistake, and the Empress also forgave him. The relationship between monarch and subject returned to how it was before. At this time, Li Mu finally had the mood to talk to her about the painting. Zhou Yi threw the dice and asked, "Have you comprehended the mystery of that painting?" Li Mu nodded and described the scene he saw in the painting. Zhou Yi was silent for a moment and said slowly, "Reverend Dao Xian indeed hid the art of painting in that painting. Thousands of years ago, when the 100 schools of thought were contending, the art of painting used the art of creating something from nothing, and it was also one of the best in the 100 schools of thought. However, after the death of Reverend Dao Xian, the art of painting lost its inheritance. This is the only painting left behind by Reverend Dao Xian. Later generations only guessed that perhaps the mystery of painting was hidden in this painting, but I didn't expect it to be true." Li Mu thought of those scenes and said with some shock, "With such a mysterious art of creating something from nothing, weren't the art cultivators back then invincible?" Zhou Yi shook her head and said, "In the path of cultivation, who dares to say that they are invincible? Legalism cultivators can say that they are the law, but they are not invincible in the world. Every path has its strengths and weaknesses, and there is no true invincibility. Although each path of cultivation has its strengths and weaknesses, but if one cultivates all paths, one can learn from the strong points to make up for the weak points and might not be invincible." At this moment, Zhou Yi stretched out her hand, a white light flashed, and the painting appeared in her hand again. She handed the painting to Li Mu and said, "Since you can comprehend the inheritance of Reverend Dao Xian, this painting is for you and you can slowly comprehend it." Li Mu took the painting and said, "Thank you, Your Majesty." An hour later, Li Mu walked out of the Changle Palace with the painting in his hand. "Stop." He had only taken 2 steps when Mr. May's voice came from behind him. Li Mu stopped, turned around and asked, "What's the matter?" Mr. May walked up and knocked on his head. "You're all grown up now and you don't even call me sister anymore." Li Mu glanced at her and asked, "Is there a sister who would risk her life to kill her brother?" Mr. May's face darkened and he said, "Don't mention this to me again." Li Mu was just saying Mr. May watched the Empress grow up and he must be closer to her than Li Mu. Just based on this, not to mention her, even Li Mu himself felt sorry for the Empress. Mr. May glanced at him and saw the thing in his hand and said in shock, "Her Majesty actually gave this painting to you?" Li Mu looked at the painting in his hand and asked, "Is there a problem?" Mr. May's expression was complicated and he said, "Her Majesty liked painting when she was young, and she admired the painter Reverend Dao Xian very much. This is the only authentic work of Reverend Zhou Xian, and also Her Majesty's favorite painting, and it was the betrothal gift that the late emperor gave to the Zhou family." She was a little emotional and said, "Her Majesty actually gave her favorite thing to you." From the way the empress purposely took this painting away from the small building, it was obvious that she really liked this painting, but she still gave it to him without hesitation. Li Mu was touched and the guilt in his heart deepened. He walked aimlessly to the Luoyang Yamen and Li Si saw him and immediately said, "Next time you treat me to a drink, pay the bill first." Li Mu waved his hand and said, "This time I'm not here to treat you to a drink, I have a question to ask you." Li Si said indifferently, "That friend of yours is in trouble again?" Li Mu nodded and said, "Under what circumstances would a person give her favorite thing to you?" Li Si glanced at him and said, "If a person is willing to give her favorite thing to you, then that thing is not her favorite thing but you." Li Si looked at Li Mu and said word by word, "You are her favorite thing." When Li Mu left the Luoyang Yamen he had a lot on his mind. Was it like Li Si said that he was the empress' favorite thing? Li Mu was sure that the empress liked him. In the eyes of others he was originally the empress' favorite official. The empress was his solid backing. He was in front of the empress, charging and breaking through enemy lines for her, solving problems for her. This kind of official deserved to be more favored. Although he was not as good as Li Si, he was not an idiot who did not know anything about love. Wasn't the empress being too nice to him a little too much? It was his first time being someone's official and he did not know what a favorite official should be like. Moreover, as an insider, Li Mu could not answer this question himself. He decided to find an outsider to ask. Mr. Mei was undoubtedly the best choice. He was the empress' favorite official and he knew the empress best as well as the relationship between him and the empress. Li Mu took her to a place far away and set up a soundproof array. Mr. Mei looked around and said angrily, "Why are you being so secretive?" Li Mu asked, "Sister Mei, do you think Her Majesty treats me well?" As soon as he said that he was hit on the head. "You're so heartless. How dare you doubt Her Majesty treats you well? Has your conscience been eaten by a dog? Let me tell you, you can doubt anyone but Her Majesty. If Her Majesty doesn't treat you well, no one else in the world will treat you well." Li Mu did not get an answer from Mr. Mei. Instead he was beaten up. He was extremely suspicious that she was abusing her power to avenge a private grudge. At the gate of the Zongjing Temple, Zhang Chun and Prince Shou watched from afar. They did not come up until Mr. Mei left. Zhang Chun asked, "How did you offend Mr. Mei?" "Nothing." Li Mu rubbed his head and asked Zhang Chun casually, "Mr. Zhang, do you think Her Majesty treats me well?" Zhang Chun stopped and slowly looked at Li Mu saying, "Mr. Li, you must have a conscience. How could you doubt, how dare you doubt Her Majesty treats you well?" Li Mu explained, "That's not what I meant." Zhang Chun asked, "Then what do you mean?" Li Mu thought for a moment and asked, "I mean, how did the former emperor treat his favorite officials, compared to Her Majesty's treatment of me?" Zhang Chun shook his head and said, "I wasn't an official at that time, how would I know?" Prince Shou glanced at Li Mu and said lightly, "How can the former emperor's favorite officials be compared to you? The former emperor didn't treat you as well as Her Majesty did." Chapter 425. In Li Mu's era, the feudal dynasty had long ceased to exist. He didn't know how the ancient emperors treated their favorite officials. He knew how the emperors treated their concubines. King Zhou was obsessed with Daji's beauty. King Yu of Zhou played with the warlords with the beacon fire just to make Bao Si smile, and Emperor Ming of Tang doted on Yang Guifei. In the future, everyone knew about their deeds. King Shou's words woke Li Mu up. In some people's eyes he was no longer a favorite official but someone like Bao Mo and Daji. Li Mu knew that the empress treated him well, but he didn't see it as clearly as King Shou and the others. It turned out that the empress treated him so well. The empress was the kind of person who would return the favor tenfold if someone treated her well. If Li Mu was a woman it wouldn't be a big deal. The empress treated Shangguan Li very well too. However, he was a man. If the empress treated him too well it would cause people to criticize him. However, Li Mu never cared about other people's criticism. Since he came to Shindu the criticism never stopped. He didn't care about these people's criticism. He only cared about the empress's feelings. After returning to the Li residence, Li Mu looked at the scroll in his hand. After thinking for a long time he took out a sound transmission instrument and said, "Qin Shi, help me investigate something." Changle Palace. Zhou Yi leaned on the dragon throne with a book in her hand. After reading a page, she realized that something was missing. She asked Mr. Mei, "Where's Li Mu?" Li Mu was late, but the Empress couldn't help but ask. Mr. Mei sighed and said, "Your Majesty, he didn't come to the palace today." Not long after, Xiao Bai and Wanwan ran in. Wanwan brought a stick of candied fruit for Zhou Yi and said, "Young master asked us to tell Sister Zhou that he has something to do in the North County. He will return to Shendu in a few days." Zhou Yi stood up and frowned. "Didn't he just go to the North County?" Xiao Bai looked disappointed and said, "Benefactor didn't take us with him either." Zhou Yi looked at the stacked memorials on the table and took out a spirit conch. After activating it, he asked, "Why did you go to North Prefecture? Do you still care about the Imperial Court and the Secretariat?" Within the spirit snail, Li Mu's voice was mixed with the sound of the wind. "Your Majesty, Mount Baiyun has summoned me urgently, so I have no choice but to return. I will explain everything to your Majesty when I return to Fairy's capital. I am still on my way, so let's talk later." After that, there was no more sound from the spirit snail. Zhou Yi put away the spiritual snail, gritted his teeth and said, "What urgent summons from Mount Baiyun? Do you think I don't know why you're here? Men are all the same. Once they get married, they forget everything. Back then, you swore that you would be loyal to me and would go through fire and water without hesitation. Now when I need you, you can't even see me." A month passed in the blink of an eye. During this month, the morning court was still held every 3 days. Although the morning court wasn't dull, there weren't any major changes. Without Li Mu, the old and new parties had been quiet for a long time after being defeated by Li Mu. The courtiers had long gotten used to the days without Li Mu. The current imperial court was very different from before. The influence of the old and new parties was not as strong as before. The Empress had absolute control over the imperial court, especially the officials led by the left Assistant Minister of Personnel, Zhang Chun. They gradually formed a force. These people held real power and had a lot of say in the imperial court. They didn't belong to any of the old and new parties and were only loyal to the Empress. Although Li Mu wasn't in the imperial court, the Great Zhou imperial court was still under his shadow. The people of Fairy's capital hadn't seen Li Mu in a long time. However, as time passed, Li Mu's reputation among the people didn't decrease. Instead, it increased. This half a year was the most comfortable half a year for the people of Fairy's capital in the past few decades. Everything the people of Fairy's capital had today was given to them by one person. He gave the people dignity, justice, and hope for their lives. In the past, Fairy's capital was lifeless. Today, Fairy's capital was filled with boundless vitality. For the past few days, the people in the streets of the Fairy's capital, whether it was the main street or the small alleys, would wake up early and clean the streets in front of their houses. After sweeping, they would rinse the streets with clean water, not leaving a speck of dust or a single leaf. Those who littered on the streets didn't need the authorities. Any commoner who saw them would go forward to stop them. The children of the officials of Fairy's capital didn't dare to ride on horses in Fairy's capital. Even if they rode in carriages or sedan chairs, they had to use roads specially designed for carriages and horses. Those who violated the rules would be severely punished. In just half a month, the entire Fairy's capital became orderly. Of course, part of the reason for this was the intervention of the authorities. However, the commoners didn't object to this. This year was the year when the countries of the Zhou continent paid tribute. From this month onwards, the envoys of the small countries in the south would arrive in Fairy's capital. As citizens of Great Zhou, they had a strong sense of pride. They didn't want to embarrass Great Zhou in front of these small countries. Great Zhou, which was born in the hinterland of Zhongjuan, used to have enemies. However, after the martial emperor, Great Zhou had almost unified the Zhou continent. The remaining small countries in the south also respected Great Zhou. They paid tribute every 5 years in exchange for Great Zhou's protection. This was the first time the various countries paid tribute since the Empress ascended the throne. It was even more important to show them the majesty of a great country. 2 men walked on the streets of Fairy's capital. The young man kept looking around as he walked. He sighed and said, "Xianxia is indeed Xianxia. This is the most prosperous, most imposing and cleanest city I've ever seen." The other middle-aged man shook his head and said in a low voice, "It's only bright on the surface. You have no idea what kind of life the commoners live here are living. What kind of darkness lies beneath all this brightness?" The young man looked around and said doubtfully, "But it looks like they're living a good life. the middle-aged man said faintly. It's all an act. Every year the Great Zhou court does this. After the tribute, everything goes back to normal. The young man looked carefully again and shook his head. I don't think they're faking it. Some things can't be faked. You're still young. There are some things you can't see through. The middle-aged man looked at the commoners of Great Zhou who walked past him. His lips moved, but he didn't say anything else. The last time he came to Fairy's capital, it was during the reign of the previous emperor. At that time, Fairy's capital looked brighter on the surface than it was now. However, the commoners of Great Zhou had faces full of numbness and despair. It left a deep impression on him. However, when he came to Fairy's capital again today, it was still the same Fairy's capital. However, the commoners of Great Zhou didn't seem to be the commoners of Great Zhou of the past. The numbness and despair on their faces were no longer there. Instead, it was replaced by smiles from the bottom of their hearts. Every commoner's eyes were shining. Was this still the Fairy's capital he knew? The middle-aged man was shocked. He muttered, "What happened here in the past 5 years?" At a tea stall by the roadside, a few passers-by were drinking tea and chatting. "I wonder where Lordly went. I haven't seen him in a long time. It's been a long time. The last time I saw him was a month ago. Lordly just got married not long ago. He should be accompanying his wife. We're all experienced people. We can understand. Lordly will probably come back. I feel uneasy when he's not in Fairy's capital." "Me too. If I don't greet Lordly every few days, I feel like something is missing. With Lordly around, there's more to life." A middle-aged man sat by the tea stall. He looked at them and asked curiously, "Excuse me, who is this Lordly you're talking about?" The few of them looked surprised. They exclaimed, "You don't know Lordly?" The middle-aged man smiled and said, "We're not from here. We don't know much about Fairy's capital." One of them poured him a cup of tea and said, "Even if you're not from here, it's impossible that you haven't heard of Lordly. This won't do. I have to explain it to you today." Just as he was about to speak, his body suddenly trembled. He looked ahead. A figure was walking on the street. The commoners crowded around him and greeted him warmly. He hurriedly stood up and waved with a smile. "Lordly, you're back." Beside the tea stall, 2 figures looked at the young man who was surrounded by the commoners of Fairy's capital. They looked surprised. Li Mu stayed on the street for a long time before he finally entered the palace. At the entrance of Changel Palace, he asked Mr. Mei, "Is His Majesty here?" Mr. Mei gave him a look, telling him to be careful later. Li Mu walked into Changel Palace. He bowed and said, "Greetings, Your Majesty." Zhou Yi was reviewing memorials. He didn't even raise his head. He said calmly, "It's only been a month. Why didn't you spend more time with your wife on Mount Baiyun? Why did you come back to Fairy's capital?" Li Mu said, "Your Majesty's birthday is coming soon. I have a few gifts for Your Majesty." Zhou Yi finally raised his head. He asked in surprise, "How do you know my birthday?" Li Mu smiled. "Mr. Mei told me." Zhou Yi coughed softly. He asked, "What gifts?" Li Mu stretched out his hand. A few scrolls appeared in his palm. With a thought, the scrolls floated into the air and slowly opened. Zhou Yi took a look and was stunned. She didn't care about her manners. She stood up and said in shock, "Zhenren Daoxian's authentic works. There's only one of his authentic works. Where did you find so many?" Li Mu lowered his head. He said, "It's just a coincidence." Zhou Yi looked at him. He counted with his fingers and said in disbelief, "You dug up his tomb?" Chapter 426. Li Mu was taken aback. The Empress could even predict this? He had a sudden thought. Reverend Dao Xian was known as the art saint. Among his authentic works, there should at least be a few that were buried with him. As long as they could find his tomb, they would be able to find his authentic works. As the Grand Elder of Corpse Sect, it was normal for him to lead Corpse Sect disciples to rob tombs. Moreover, to the Corpse Sect disciples, there was nothing deeper than robbing tombs together and fighting big dumplings together. In this 1 month, he had shortened the distance between him and the disciples of the Corpse Sect to a great extent, and had also completely gained their trust. However, finding the art saint's tomb was far more difficult than Li Mu had imagined. Reverend Dao Xian was an ancient from the previous dynasty. He had fallen more than 1,000 years ago. There were very few records about him. With the help of the Corpse Sect disciples, Li Mu spent almost a month to find his tomb. It was also thanks to the corpse sect. They were not good at other things, but digging tombs was something that every corpse sect disciple was familiar with. In order to steal strong corpses to refine corpses, they had to be proficient in feng shui knowledge. This was very useful for exploring tombs. An outstanding corpse sect disciple was definitely an outstanding feng shui master. A skilled feng shui master did not even need to consult ancient books. They only needed to use their eyes to see if there was an ancient tomb in a place. Based on the feng shui of the tomb, they could determine the position or strength of the corpse of Mu Zhong when he was alive. Reverend Zhou Xian was the last painting master. After him, the art of painting was cut off. In these years, countless people had searched for his tomb. Naturally, there was a lot of information about this. However, after 1,000 years, no one had found it. The corpse sect had searched for it before. However, everyone knew that Reverend Zhou Xian, the art saint, had dismembered himself before he fell. His tomb was only a cenotaph. This, to the corpse sect, was naturally boring. Many years ago they spent a lot of effort but still could not find his tomb. The corpse sect gave up immediately. After all, there were more strong warriors' tombs waiting for them to explore. This time the members of the corpse sect had searched for an entire month. They didn't know how many tombs they had snuck into and investigated before they finally found the tomb of the art saint. The dignified art saint, a powerhouse of his generation, had actually built his tomb in such a simple and crude manner. Ordinary people would probably think that it was a commoner's tomb. This was also the reason why no one had ever found this tomb in the past 1,000 years. If it wasn't for the fact that Li Mu just happened to have an authentic painting of the painting saint in his possession that produced a subtle connection with the objects buried with the tomb, Li Mu would probably have missed it as well. Looking at the Empress's shocked expression, Li Mu said with a straight face, "I am doing this for the inheritance of the art Dao. I believe that Senior Art Saint won't blame me. Besides, there are no remains in his tomb, so it isn't considered an offense. Alright, whose paintings does your majesty like? I will send people to dig them up." The people of the corpse sect are very good at finding and robbing tombs. Mr. May stood in the middle of the hall with a stunned expression on his face. Damn it, this was clearly a very disappointing matter. Why did it sound so sweet when it came from Li Mu's mouth? After Zhou Yi came back to her senses, she hurriedly said, No need." Then she suddenly realized something. Looking at Li Mu, she asked, "Could it be that you weren't at Mount Baiyun this month?" Li Mu still said with some trepidation, "The tomb of the art saint is not easy to find. It was just a coincidence that I almost wasted a month of effort. Fortunately, I managed to find it before your majesty's birthday." Zhou Yi was slightly delighted, but her expression was still dignified. She said, "The tomb is full of dangers. Have you forgotten what happened in the White Emperor's cave? Don't do such dangerous things in the future." Li Mu nodded repeatedly. "I will do as you command." Zhou Yi said lightly, "Go to the back hall. Xiao Bai and Wanwan have been thinking about you all day." Li Mu bowed and said, "I will take my leave now." When Li Mu turned and walked into the back hall, the solemnity on Zhou Yi's face disappeared. She admired the few authentic works of the art saint, and the corners of her mouth couldn't help but curl up slightly. Mr. May walked forward and explained, "Your Majesty, I didn't tell him your Majesty's birthday. He must have heard about it from somewhere else. This rascal, he didn't care about court affairs for a month just to flatter your Majesty. He is becoming more and more immature. No wonder people are talking about him behind his back." Zhou Yi nodded deeply and said, "Keep an eye on him. Don't let him fool around anymore." Mr. May raised his head and looked at the Empress. Even his eyes were smiling. He could only say helplessly, "I know." In the back hall of Changel Palace, Li Mu hugged Xiao Bai and spun around. He gave Wanwan the same treatment. Wanwan hugged his arm and looked at him pitifully. She said, "Sir, next time wherever you go, can you bring us along?" If Li Mu was going to play, of course he would bring them along. But this time he was going to dig up graves. How could he bring two delicate little girls along? But looking at Wanwan's eyes, he couldn't say no. He could only say, "Okay, I promise you. In the future, if I can bring you along, I will try my best. I haven't seen you for a month. Let me check your cultivation first." Wanwan raised her head and said proudly, "I am already at the 4th realm." Although Wanwan's talent was average, she had the Empress's support and had endless cultivation resources. In addition, with the Empress's guidance, her cultivation had already reached the theurgy level at a young age. Because of Ling Tong, her strength was far beyond the theurgy level. If ordinary creation realm cultivators didn't pay attention, they would also be bewitched by her. Xiao Bai's talent wasn't low. Before Li Mu left, she had already advanced to the five-tailed realm. In this month her cultivation didn't improve at all. Firstly, she was like Li Mu. Her cultivation was forcefully raised. If she didn't accumulate enough, it would be very difficult for her cultivation to improve. Unless she encountered a great opportunity, it would be very difficult for her to improve in a short time. Under normal circumstances, the Fox clan needed decades to advance from the five-tailed realm to the six-tailed realm. And 99% of the five-tailed foxes would never be able to cross this hurdle in their lifetime. Now, Xiao Bai wasn't just facing the problem of stagnation in her cultivation. She still lacked the cultivation method after the five-tailed realm. Xiao Bai's grandmother only had the cultivation method of the Fox clan before the fifth realm. If she wasn't of the Fox clan, Li Mu, who had the Demon clan's heavenly book, could provide her with the cultivation method from the fifth realm to the ninth realm. However, the Fox clan's cultivation method was independent of the Demon clan. Li Mu couldn't provide her with any help. Li Mu wasn't the only one who couldn't. The Empress couldn't either. The Fox clan's cultivation method was only passed down to the Fox clan unless they found a fifth realm fox demon. Li Mu knew a fifth realm fox demon and she owed him a favor. In principle, Li Mu could ask for her favor and pave the way for Xiao Bai's cultivation. However, Phantom Princess was his enemy. It was very likely that he didn't ask for her favor and would end up losing his own life. Moreover, this wasn't a long-term solution. Even if he had the cultivation method for the fifth realm, he still didn't know anything about the sixth realm. When Xiao Bai's cultivation level increased, she would encounter the same problem. Actually, there was another way. That was to let Xiao Bai cultivate the ordinary demon Dao. She was already at the fifth realm and had already surpassed consciousness opening, fetus molding, and transfiguration. She only needed 1 or 2 years to condense a demon core. However, this way her identity as a Fox clan member would be wasted. Even if her cultivation level increased, her mantissa wouldn't increase and she wouldn't have the Fox clan's talent. Unless it was absolutely necessary, Li Mu wouldn't let her take this path. If she could obtain the Fox clan's heavenly book from the Illusion Lord, Xiao Bai's cultivation would be smooth sailing. However, it wasn't easy to steal a treasure from a fox's mouth. He could only find another opportunity in the future. Li Mu stroked Xiao Bai's head and said, "Don't worry. I'll find the cultivation method for you after the fifth realm as soon as possible." After accompanying Xiao Bai and Wan Wan for a while, they went to play by themselves. Li Mu stayed in the room alone. He stretched out his hand and a brush appeared in his hand. This brush was found by Li Mu in the painting sage's cenotaph. This brush was identical to the brush used by the old man at the bow of the boat in the painting. It was likely an item belonging to the painting sage. However, Li Mu couldn't create something out of nothing with this brush. This meant that the profundity of this art lay in the caster and not the brush. This was a large part of the reason why the painting Dao was cut off. Be it the Buddhist Dao, the demonic Dao, or the ghost Dao, it was very easy to gain a rudimentary understanding of cultivation. All one needed to do was cultivate step by step. Therefore they were able to endure for so long. For artists and musicians, to gain a rudimentary understanding of their arts, one had to have superb artistic attainments. Just this alone was enough to keep most people at bay. Without anyone cultivating it, it wasn't surprising that the heritage was cut off. However, no matter how difficult this path was, Li Mu had to give it a try. The painting sage's divine power of painting in the void gave Li Mu a great deal of inspiration. The painting Dao could create something out of nothing. If he used the same method to draw talismans, wouldn't he be able to save talisman materials and condense talismans in the void? Li Mu thought about it carefully and felt that this idea was very feasible. If he wanted to cultivate the painting Dao, he had to start by learning how to draw. This was also the first time Li Mu realized that he didn't have any artistic talent. With his cultivation he could control every muscle in his body, including his hands. However, drawing required more than just the control of the body. It was the same landscape painting, but Li Mu had imitated Zhou Xian's authentic work. On the surface, there was not much difference between the two paintings, but when one compared them, one would have to wonder what exactly he had painted. In the room, Li Mu looked at a new painting on the table and frowned. The Empress walked in from outside and asked, "What are you doing?" Li Mu said, "Your Majesty, Can you help me take a look and see what's wrong with this painting of mine? It has form but no spirit. You haven't gained a rudimentary understanding of it. Zhou Yi glanced at it and said lightly. She then asked, You want to learn to draw? Li Mu nodded and said, It seems that I can't just draw blindly. I have to find someone to guide me. Who should I find? The Empress looked at the painting and coughed lightly. Li Mu suddenly looked at the Empress and his eyes lit up. He was really stupid. The person who could teach him how to draw was so close and so far away. He looked at the Empress and said, The painting skills of the painters in the palace are definitely not bad. Can I have them teach me how to draw? Chapter 427. In the back hall of Changel Palace, Zhou Yi fell silent after hearing Li Mu's words. Li Mu saw that she didn't answer for a long time and couldn't help but ask, Your Majesty, can't I? Zhou Yi glanced at him and said lightly, Yes, but there are many rules for painters in the palace. Even if you want to learn, they may not be willing to teach you. If they don't want to, I can't force them. Li Mu nodded and said, Of course. If they don't want to, I can only find someone else. Zhou Yi walked to the front hall and glanced at Mr. Mei. She said, Mei Wei, go to the secretary department and find a painter to teach Li Mu how to paint. Say it's under my orders. Mr. Mei bowed and said, Yes, Your Majesty. Zhou Yi added, If the painter doesn't want to, don't force him. Mr. Mei looked up at her and met her eyes. He nodded and said, I understand. Li Mu wanted to choose his own teacher. He walked to Mr. Mei and said, I'll go with you. You stay. Zhou Xian glanced at him and said in an unquestionable tone, As an official of the imperial court, you left your post without my permission for more than a month. I haven't punished you yet. You stand here for 15 minutes and reflect. Yes, Your Majesty. Li Mu sighed and obediently stood where he was. Although he had wanted to give the Empress a surprise and at the same time try to find an inheritance of the art Dao, he had also violated the rules of the imperial court and should be punished. Moreover, he wasn't a primary school student. Standing for 15 minutes wasn't a punishment at all. Li Mu stood in the hall. Zhou Yi didn't sit down. She walked to him and said, In addition, without my permission, you're not allowed to dig people's graves. If there's a next time, it won't be as simple as standing. Li Mu said sincerely, I know my mistake. No matter what, entering someone else's tomb was always immoral. Moreover, it was disrespectful to the dead. He was not Thousand Illusions and did not really like this. With the Empress's permission, for example, entering the White Emperor cave and getting the page of the Tomes of Arcane was a reasonable archaeological excavation. Or, for the sake of passing down the painting doctrine, visiting the tomb of the painting saint from 1,000 years ago was justifiable. In order to unravel the mysteries of the ancient era and explore the ancient history, it was not only the demonic Dao but also the righteous Dao cultivators. If there were similar situations in the future, he could just apply to her first. In Changel Palace, Li Mu stood obediently as punishment. In the Secretary province, Mr. Mei had already summoned 3 court painters. Although their cultivations weren't high, they were all existences standing at the pinnacle of Great Zhou's painting and calligraphy world. They represented the pinnacle of Great Zhou's art. An old man bowed and asked, What orders do you have, sir? Lord Mei said indifferently, You are the most experienced and skilled painters in the palace. Li Mu, the Imperial Secretariat's official, is currently learning how to paint. He wants to find one of you to teach him. The white-haired old man stepped forward and said, I admire Sir Li's actions very much. I'm willing to use all my life's knowledge to teach Sir Li painting skills. The other middle-aged man didn't dare to show weakness and said, It's my honor to teach Sir Li. I'm also willing to teach him all my painting skills. The last young man said, If Sir Li is interested in painting women, you can come to me at any time. Mr. Mei glanced at them and asked, Your painting skills can't be easily taught to outsiders, so no one will teach him, understand? The old man was puzzled and asked, Why? The middle-aged man was surprised and said, Our master didn't set such a rule. The young man was puzzled and asked, Why is that? Mr. Mei said coldly, You don't have to ask why. If Li Mu asks, just say so. If anyone wants to teach him, they don't have to come tomorrow. The 3 men's expressions became serious and they immediately spoke. Sir. Understood. Understood. After Lord Mei left, the 3 of them looked at each other with puzzled expressions. One moment he's allowed to teach, the next moment he's not. Is he going to teach or not? Of course not. Didn't you hear what Commander May said at the end? Whoever dares to teach him can pack up and go home tomorrow. Let's listen to Commander May. She's by His Majesty's side. Her wishes are His Majesty's wishes. We can't go against his orders. If he wants to teach, then teach. If he doesn't want to teach, then don't teach. What is His Majesty playing at? Oh right, I remember that His Majesty also likes painting. The Art Saint's original work is in His Majesty's hands. If he doesn't want us to teach him, does His Majesty want to teach him himself? Shu, be careful with your words, Changel Palace. Li Mu had been standing there for 15 minutes. He was eating the grapes given by the Empress while waiting for Mr. May to return. Li Mu was quite confident about this matter. Although many people in Fairy's capital didn't like him, there were even more people who liked him. He wasn't loved by everyone, but with his status, it shouldn't be a problem to hire a few court painters to teach him painting. Moreover, the Empress had given him a verbal order not to force them. It was just a casual remark. Everyone knew that the Empress favored him the most. If anyone dared to refuse, they wouldn't have to come to work tomorrow. Soon, footsteps could be heard outside Changel Palace. Mr. May walked in and bowed. Your Majesty, none of the 3 painters are willing to teach him. Li Mu was stunned. Then he asked in disbelief, why? Lord May explained, they said that their painting skills are not taught to outsiders, so they can't teach you. Zhou Yi glanced at Li Mu and said calmly, since they have such a rule, I can't force them. You'd better find someone else. Li Mu couldn't accept this fact. He personally went to the Secretary Province and found the 3 painters. The old man said apologetically, Lord Li, I'm really sorry. Please forgive me for not being able to help you. I once swore to the heavens that I wouldn't teach my painting skills to anyone else. Otherwise, I'd be struck by lightning and die a horrible death. Li Mu looked at the middle-aged man. The middle-aged man immediately said, same for me. The young man also immediately said, same for me. Li Mu shook his head and said disappointedly, I finally know why the art of painting was cut off. If the painters in the past were like you, it would be strange if the art of painting didn't change. Li Mu had been curious before. Taoism was easy to get started with, and it was easy to get started with it. Furthermore, it was open to the public and did not hide anything. It served them right to flourish. Even if it was harder to learn the art of painting, could it be harder than legalism? Nowadays, legalism still appeared often, but there were no painters. This might be the reason. However, Li Mu couldn't force others to follow this rule. At most, he could only lament their misfortune and be angry at their incompetence. After returning from the Secretary Province, Mr. May suddenly said, why don't you let Her Majesty teach you? Li Mu was stunned. He asked, does Her Majesty know how to paint? Mr. May rolled his eyes and said, why do you think Her Majesty likes to collect the works of the art saint? Her Majesty has liked to paint since she was young. Her painting skills are comparable to the top painters in the palace. Li Mu knew that the Empress liked to play with flowers and plants. He had known her for so long, but he had never seen her paint. However, there was no need for Sir May to lie to him about such things. How could a person who didn't know anything about painting like a painting be his favorite thing? Moreover, when the Empress had commented on his painting, she had seemed to be quite professional. Li Mu sighed softly. He felt like he had searched for her thousands of times in the crowd, but when he looked back, she was in the dim light. It was just that the light was too dazzling and Li Mu didn't notice it for a moment. It turned out that the Empress was the person he had been looking for. Changel Palace. Wan looked at the table full of dishes and said in surprise, what's the occasion today? Why are there so many dishes? Xiaobai looked and said, they all seem to be Sister Zhou's favorite. Wan said, I like them too. Xiaobai muttered, as long as it's edible you like it. Li Mu patted their heads and said, today is your Sister Zhou's birthday. Every dish on the table was made by Li Mu himself, and they were all the Empress's favorites. He hadn't made so many dishes for a long time. This time he had to be more attentive since he had a favor to ask. After eating and drinking, the 2 lively girls went out to digest. Li Mu looked at the Empress and asked with a smile, are these dishes to your liking, Your Majesty? Zhou Yi nodded and said, yes, you are very considerate. Li Mu struck while the iron was hot and said, Your Majesty, I have a presumptuous request. Zhou Yi said indifferently, what is it? Say it. Li Mu raised his head and said, Mr. May said that Your Majesty's painting skills are unparalleled. I would like to ask Your Majesty to teach me how to paint. Zhou Yi thought for a moment and said, for the sake of these dishes I agree. Mei Wei, prepare the brush and ink. Chapter 428. In Chang'an Palace, Li Mu quietly watched the Empress paint. At this moment, the Empress was the most serious, just like when she was trimming the flowers and plants. She painted the same landscape as Li Mu and used the same brush and ink as Li Mu. The mountains and water in the painting were lively and lively, unlike the empty mountains and stagnant waters in Li Mu's painting. What depressed Li Mu the most was that the two paintings looked similar at first glance, but when he felt it carefully there was a world of difference. After finishing the last stroke, the Empress put down the brush and said softly, the art saint once said that there are 3 realms in painting. Painting the mountain is a mountain, painting the water is water. Painting the mountain is not a mountain, painting the water is not water. Painting the mountain is still a mountain, painting the water is still water. You have only just entered the first realm. You can barely draw the shape of the mountains and rivers, but you can't draw the meaning of the mountains and rivers. Li Mu asked, how can I draw the meaning of the mountains and rivers? The Empress said leisurely, see more and paint more. When you have enough experience, you will naturally be able to draw the meaning of the mountains and rivers. I will teach you the basic techniques first. If there is anything you don't understand you can ask me. Li Mu asked again, how long will it take for me to reach the second realm? Zhou Yi said indifferently, at least 2 to 3 years, at most 20 to 30 years. It depends on your comprehension. The improvement of one's painting skills couldn't be achieved in a day. Li Mu could only learn slowly from the Empress. The Empress would give Li Mu pointers every day. Other than the basic practice, Li Mu would also immerse himself in the art saint's authentic works and seriously comprehend them. He would improve a lot every day. These days what surprised Li Mu was that the Empress was actually so artistic. In the past, Li Mu's understanding of her was limited to the fact that she was beautiful, a cultivation genius, a 7th realm elite, a petty and simple queen who liked to play with flowers and plants, and a sweet and naive one. If the Empress hadn't mentioned it, Li Mu wouldn't have known that she was also a master painter. Later on he found out that before he entered the palace, Zhou Yi of the Zhou clan was famous in the divine capital for his talent in cultivation and his attainments in painting. Li Mu had been with the Empress for a long time. Based on his understanding of her, when Zhou Xian was a young girl, she probably only wanted to have her own flower garden in the future so that she could plant flowers and paint when she was in the mood. But after she became an adult, these things became more and more distant from her. Mr. May and Li Mu walked in the palace. She let out a sigh of relief and smiled. Ever since you came to the palace, everything has changed. In the past, the emperor could only go to the royal garden after morning court. He had no time to paint. Sometimes when I patrolled late at night, I could still see the emperor sitting on the roof. Li Mu rolled his eyes at her and said, isn't it because the things that should have been done by His Majesty have been done by me these days? Otherwise, His Majesty wouldn't have so much free time. Mr. May smiled and said, that's why, if only you had entered the palace 3 years earlier. If you had entered the palace 3 years earlier, the emperor wouldn't have had to suffer these 3 years. 3 years ago, Li Mu wasn't Li Mu yet, so such a possibility didn't exist. For the current Li Mu, if he had to deal with memorials every day, he would also be annoyed. It was better to help the Empress complete her great cause and then live in seclusion in the fields, planting vegetables and flowers. In the past year, the faith of the people in the 36 counties of the Great Zhou had almost doubled compared to a few years ago. In terms of governance, the only emperor in the history of the Great Zhou who could compare to the Empress was Emperor Wen. If the current policy was maintained and the people were allowed to recuperate for 10 years, surpassing Emperor Wen wouldn't be difficult. In these 10 years, the faith of the people in the Great Zhou would gradually stabilize and wouldn't increase too much. In this way, the nurturing of the emperor's qi would be far away in the future. To accelerate the nurturing of the emperor's qi and allow the empress to be liberated sooner, the only way was to greatly increase the faith of the people in the counties. Once the faith of the people had stabilized, internal factors alone wouldn't be able to stimulate the people. At this time, some external stimulation would be needed. For example, subduing the Yao Kingdom and the Ghost Realm, eliminating the Demon Sect, or unifying the Zhou province. These things could greatly stimulate the people of the Great Zhou and make their support for the Empress reach a peak. Naturally, there was no need to worry about the faith of the people. However, none of these things were easy to accomplish. On the contrary, it was easy to waste all the previous efforts. Once the Yao Kingdom or the Ghost Realm invaded or the demon sect wreaked havoc in the counties, causing the Great Zhou to be in turmoil, all the efforts he and the Empress had put in over the past year would be wasted. Of course, the Great Zhou could still keep these forces in check at the moment. The only trouble was the southern countries. For a long time, the southern countries were vassals of the Great Zhou. Every year they paid tribute. The Great Zhou provided protection for them. At that time, the Great Zhou was undoubtedly the overlord of the Zhou continent. However, the successive two incapable emperors caused the Great Zhou's national strength to rapidly decline within a few decades. It also caused the vassal countries in the south to have disloyalty. In these few decades, the tributes from the various countries went from once a year to once every 2 years, once every 3 years, and once every 5 years until the end of the previous emperor's reign. Now the Shao royal family had even lost control of the Great Zhou. Such a large empire had fallen into the hands of a woman. The thoughts of the various countries became more active. This time the ambassadors of the various countries took advantage of the tributes and gathered in Chengdu. They had already communicated with each other. It seemed that they had reached some kind of tacit agreement to completely break away from the Great Zhou and cancel the tributes. Although this didn't cause any substantial losses to the Great Zhou, it was a huge blow to the hearts of the people. The Great Zhou used to be the Celestial Empire. The surrounding countries all submitted to it. If the various countries broke away from the Great Zhou while the Empress was on the throne, it would be a great sin that the Empress couldn't make up for with any achievements. Although this was a mess left behind by the previous two emperors of the Great Zhou, they were already dead. The people would only blame the Empress. Li Mu pondered for a moment. He looked at Mr. Mei and asked, "Is it true that the various countries want to break away from the Great Zhou?" Speaking of this, Mr. Mei's expression became serious. He nodded and said, "It is true. In these few decades, the various countries have become more and more dissatisfied with the Great Zhou. The last time the various countries paid tribute, because of the previous emperor's incompetence, caused the imperial court to lose face in front of the ambassadors of the various countries. It also caused them to become disloyal. In these 5 years from the passing of the previous emperor, to the Zhou family seizing the emperor's qi, and the ascension of the empress, the Great Zhou has been in turmoil. Their ambitions can't be hidden anymore," Li Mu said calmly. "This is normal. Who wants to be a vassal of others forever? To them they probably want the Great Zhou to be destroyed. They want to take advantage of the chaos to carve up the Great Zhou." Mr. Mei said angrily, "A bunch of immature wolves. They probably forgot who helped them defend against the enemies of Yanzhou and Changzhou. Without the Great Zhou they would have been swallowed up by others long ago. Not even dregs are left." Li Mu shook his head and said, "Calm down. Times have changed. It is no longer the time of the previous emperor. Even if they really have disloyalty, I'm afraid they don't have the guts." Honglu Temple. The residence of the various countries' ambassadors. In a courtyard, a middle-aged man in a long robe and a young man beside him stood quietly in the courtyard. Their gazes were looking in the direction of the imperial palace. Their eyes shone with a golden light. At the end of their line of sight, a certain part of the sky was shining with golden light. It didn't take long for the golden light in their eyes to disappear. That part of the sky also returned to its original color. The young man asked doubtfully, "Didn't Sir say that the Great Zhou's destiny has come to an end, and that the common people are disloyal to the court? Why is there still so much psychokinesis in the Great Zhou ancestral temple?" The middle-aged man said in a deep voice, "The Great Zhou of today is no longer the Great Zhou of the past. I originally thought that the Great Zhou replacing the Shao family was the last bit of destiny for the Great Zhou. I didn't expect that in just 5 years, no, in just 1 year, the Great Zhou would return to its 100-year-old peak." The young man asked, "Then do we still want to leave the Great Zhou?" The middle-aged man said softly, "Let's wait and see first." A strange light flashed in his eyes. He said meaningfully, "Li Mu." A rueful look appeared in the young man's eyes. He said, "That Li Mu is truly formidable. He actually has the ability to change the destiny of a country. If my great Yong also had such a character, the national strength would definitely be even more prosperous. In 100 years, we might be able to unify the ancestral province." In the Chang'e Palace, the corners of Zhou Yi's mouth curled up. He said disdainfully, "In your dreams." Li Mu, who was in the middle of painting, raised his head. he asked doubtfully. What did your Imperial Majesty just say? Zhou Yi's expression returned to normal. He said, nothing. Continue painting. Don't get distracted. Chapter 429. In the Chang'e Palace, Li Mu was painting seriously. These days he gradually felt that it was not a bad thing that the painters in the palace were not willing to teach him. The Empress's attainments in painting were extremely high, and when she taught him she was gentle and responsible. In just 2 days, Li Mu had already forgotten all about being a court painter, and was wholeheartedly focused on learning from the Empress. Zhou Yi stood beside Li Mu. As she looked, she said, in painting there is no need to stick to the appearance. You have to use the appearance to write the spirit. You have to search for the feeling between resemblance and non-resemblance. Li Mu carefully pondered her words. After a while, the Empress sat back on the dragon throne and said softly, later today the imperial court will invite the ambassadors of the various countries to a banquet in the Chaoyang Hall. You will go with the officials of the Secretariat. Great Zhou was the sovereign state. Every time they paid tribute, they would invite the ambassadors of the various countries. At that time, besides the important officials of the imperial court, the Empress would also attend. After finishing this painting, Li Mu went to the Secretariat. Today's banquet was only for officials of the 4th rank and above. In the Secretariat, only the head of the Secretariat and 2 assistant ministers were qualified. Li Mu had just returned to the duty room when Lu Yi walked in and asked, will Lord Li also attend today's banquet? Li Mu nodded and said, Her Majesty has asked me to go with the officials of the Secretariat. Although Li Mu's rank was not high enough, it was within Lu Yi's expectations that he would go. He smiled and said, in that case I will call Lord Li again later. There was still some time before the banquet, so Li Mu had nothing to do. He stretched out his hand. With a flash of white light, the art saint's brush appeared in his hand. He gripped the brush and attempted to draw a few strokes in the void, yet nothing was left behind. Li Mu had the Empress try before, and she was also unable to use the ultimate art of creating something from nothing of the painting path. It was fine if Li Mu couldn't do it, but even the Empress couldn't. Li Mu had reason to suspect that this technique was the same as Dao techniques and mystical powers. It should also require a chant or an incantation. Unfortunately, the tomb of the art saint was very simple. Other than this brush and a few authentic works, there was nothing else. On the Dao of painting, Li Mu encountered the same predicament as Xiao Bai. They both lacked cultivation dermic formulations. Xiao Bai's predicament was easy to resolve. The white fox race was still a large fey race, but the Dao of painting had not appeared for a long time. At present, the only thing Li Mu could do was to learn painting from the Empress and wait for the right opportunity. Half an hour later, Li Mu, Lu Yi, and the others walked towards the Chaoyang Hall. This hall was to the left of the Crepe Myrtle Hall. During the time of the previous emperor, he often held banquets for officials and clans. Walking into the Chaoyang Hall, Li Mu walked to his seat and sat down looking across. At this banquet, the officials of the Great Zhou sat on the left, and the ambassadors of the various countries sat on the right. Across from Li Mu were the ambassadors of the various countries. There were more than 10 small countries in the southeast and southwest of Zhou province. The combined area of these small countries was only half the size of Great Zhou. In these 100 years they were all vassals of Great Zhou. They paid tribute to Great Zhou and Great Zhou provided them with protection. Other than this relationship, Great Zhou would not interfere with their internal affairs. Among these countries, Liang, Yu, Jiang, Jing, Xin and Yong were the most powerful. Among the 6 Daoist sects, other than the Fulu school and Xuanzong, which were located in Great Zhou, the other 4 sects were located in Liang, Yu, Jiang and Jing. Relying on these 4 sects, these 4 countries had considerable influence in the south. Although Xin did not have a Daoist sect, it was the birthplace of Buddhism. Among the various countries, it had the largest area and the largest population. Its strength could not be underestimated. In the past, Xin was a formidable rival of Great Zhou. When Great Zhou was first established, Xin took advantage of the Great Zhou's instability to provoke Great Zhou. Taizu sent troops to attack Xin's capital. If it were not for Great Zhou's policy of peace, Xin would have long been erased from the Zhou continent. Since then, Xingua had been completely well-behaved. For a long time, Xin had the ambition to become the overlord of the Zhou continent. However, due to the existence of Great Zhou, they could only settle for second place. Even so, they never extinguished their desire to dominate. Although Yong did not have any powerful sects, Yong's imperial family was extremely powerful. They had more than one expert of the upper realm, far surpassing the Great Zhou's Xiao clan. What was even rarer was that as Great Zhou's emperors grew more and more muddle-headed with each generation, Yong produced 5 generations of wise emperors. They worked hard for 100 years, sweeping away all obstacles within the country and completing the peaceful unification of the country. During these 100 years, Yong's national strength steadily increased. In Zhuzhou, it was the third most powerful country, second only to Great Zhou and Shen. In the beginning, the other countries were very submissive to Great Zhou, practically kneeling and begging. They wanted to use their tributes in exchange for Great Zhou's protection. Without Great Zhou, they would have to face enemies from other continents. However, following the decline of Great Zhou, their thoughts naturally changed. They began to look forward to Great Zhou's destruction and its replacement as the new overlord of the Zhou continent. However, the previous emperor's muddle-headedness had caused Great Zhou to sink into a quagmire. Coincidentally, the Great Zhou had rebelled and seized power, causing Great Zhou to become even more chaotic. The other countries' thoughts were bound to become even more active. This tribute had to intimidate these people enough. Otherwise, Great Zhou would lose its right to speak on the Zhou continent and its prestige as a great country. While Li Mu was observing the various countries' envoys, a man seated across from him, wearing clothes different from those of Great Zhou, called over the eunuch behind him and asked in a low voice, "Who is Lord Li Mu of your esteemed country?" The eunuch looked across, his gaze searching. Replying to the envoy, "Starting from the table directly across from you, the third person on the left is Lord Li Mu." The man, as well as the several people at the 2 tables beside him, looked over at the same time, their hearts trembling. "He's that Li Mu? He's so young. Great Zhou has changed too much in the past few years. This person is so young, but his methods are so powerful." Everyone had been in Luoyang for several days and was no stranger to Li Mu's name. On the first day they arrived in Luoyang, they had heard of his name in the ears of the common people. At first they were curious, but after some investigation they were only left with shock. Abolishing the criminal substitution law, reforming the recruitment of officials, cleaning up the academy's court, attacking the old and new parties, and taking back power to the Empress of Great Zhou. Everything he did was earth-shattering. Who didn't know about the criminal substitution law of Great Zhou? This law separated the common people from the nobles. Although it was convenient for the nobles and officials, it was a nightmare for the poor common people. Ever since this law was promulgated, the faith of the people of Great Zhou decreased year by year. The various countries saw this and were happy in their hearts. The emperor of Great Zhou was so muddle-headed and the court was so decadent. It would be best if the various counties of Great Zhou rose up in revolt and rebelled against the court. This would also give them an opportunity to take advantage of and divide up Great Zhou. From then on, they would no longer have to submit to others. However, in the past 5 years this law had been abolished. Li Mu had also used a few cases to trick the previous emperor into giving away the death exemption golden medallion. From then on, the nobles who broke the law would be punished the same as the common people. After these things, the people of Great Zhou began to unite again. In addition, Li Mu had also proposed the imperial examination, breaking the academy's dictatorship. He had recruited talents from the local areas and once again united the people's hearts. This was far from enough. In the past few years, the court of Great Zhou had been firmly controlled by the old and new parties. It had been in a state of internal friction. However, in the past 2 years, it had been attacked by Li Mu at the same time, greatly strengthening the centralization of power of the Empress of Great Zhou. In the past 5 years, earth-shattering things had happened in Great Zhou. Outsiders had seized power and the country had changed owners. The various countries thought that the opportunity they had been waiting for 100 years had come. They were about to take advantage of this tribute to renegotiate terms with the Great Zhou. However, after arriving at Luoyang, everything here made them dumbfounded. There were no common people living in the abyss of suffering, nor was there an imperial court that was about to collapse. Great Zhou was still the powerful Great Zhou. They cleaned up the Great Zhou internally and reformed the evil laws. They were also extremely strong externally. Even the powerful demon path had suffered a lot at their hands. They were silent for a while and this completely disrupted their plans. And all of this was because of the man opposite them. He had saved a building from collapse. He was deeply trusted by the people of Great Zhou. He was the most favored official of the Empress of Great Zhou. He was Li Mu of the Secretariat. In the eyes of the crowd there was pity, admiration and resentment. They regretted that they had lost the opportunity they had waited so long for. They admired Li Mu's actions. Putting aside their standpoints, what he had done was worthy of everyone's admiration. It was normal for them to feel resentment. Because of this person's existence, their many years of anticipation had gone up in smoke. How could they not hate him? Soon the expressions of the two envoys from the Xin nation, who had hidden resentment in their eyes, changed. Their emotions and strength were actually being sucked away by someone through the air. The two of them immediately guarded their hearts and minds, and only then did they manage to guard the power of their emotions. In the great hall, several gazes swept over Li Mu. The calm secretary of the Secretariat revealed a meaningful smile on his face. Li Mu tilted his head slightly and asked Lu Yi, who was beside him, "Lord Lu, which country are the two people wearing hats opposite us from?" Lu Yi looked up and said, "They are the envoys from the Xin nation." Li Mu understood and said, "As expected, they are from the Xin nation." Among the countries in the Zhou continent, the Xin nation was the one that refused to accept the Great Zhou the most. For a long time, the Xin nation regarded itself as the overlord of the Zhou continent. Their self-confidence was extremely inflated. They wanted to bully the Great Zhou that had just been established and its foundation was not very stable. Instead they were attacked by the Great Zhou near their capital and were almost destroyed. Only then did they become well-behaved and pay tribute every year to show their allegiance. In these years, although the Xin nation had not developed much, the Great Zhou had been declining. If one were to say who in the Zhou continent wanted the Great Zhou to collapse and disappear, it would undoubtedly be the Xin nation. Lu Yi's mouth twitched and said, "The Xin nation has always wanted to see us make a fool of ourselves. This time I'm afraid they will be disappointed." The Xin nation's envoy had suffered a hidden loss at the hands of Li Mu, but he did not dare to act up. After glaring angrily at Li Mu, he looked away. As the banquet began, the gazes on Li Mu gradually decreased. However, Li Mu noticed that a gaze diagonally to his left was always on him. Li Mu followed the gaze and saw a young man hurriedly look away. Li Mu casually asked Lu Yi, "Which country is that young man from?" Lu Yi looked and said, "He should be from the Yong kingdom." The Yong kingdom was not large, but its strength was not weak. This was especially true for the Yong royal family, which was the most powerful in the Zhou continent. In terms of the number of experts in the upper realm, the Yong kingdom was comparable to the 6 schools and 4 sects. The Yong kingdom had produced 5 wise rulers in succession and could be considered a legend in the Zhou continent. Li Mu's gaze swept past the young man and looked at the middle-aged man beside him. The man's aura was concealed and not a trace was leaked. He looked like a mortal who had never cultivated. However, the Yong kingdom would not send a mortal. Even if his cultivation had not reached the 7th realm, it should be very close. Li Mu's gaze quickly returned to the young man. It was not because he was handsome, but because although he was no longer looking at Li Mu, he had begun to steal glances at the Empress. From time to time, his gaze would glance at the curtains in front of him. When he noticed that Li Mu was looking at him, he immediately lowered his head and focused on the food on the table in front of him. The young man discovered that every time he tried to steal a glance at the legendary figure of the Zhou continent behind the curtains, a gaze would fall on him. After a few times, he no longer dared to steal another glance. The atmosphere at the banquet was exceptionally harmonious. None of the envoys from the various countries proposed to leave the Great Zhou and stop paying tribute. They had already reached an agreement on this matter. However, what they had seen and heard in the Great Zhou over the past few days forced them to be cautious. When the banquet was about to end, Mr. Mei walked in from outside and hurried behind the curtains. He seemed to have something urgent to attend to. Li Mu noticed that an envoy from the Xin kingdom sitting opposite him seemed to have received some kind of message. His expression slowly darkened. He left his seat and walked to the center of the hall. In a deep voice he said, "Your Majesty, I have just learned that a citizen of my country has been killed in your country. You must give us a satisfactory explanation for this matter. Otherwise, the Xin kingdom will no longer pay tribute to the Great Zhou Empire." When the courtiers in the hall heard this, they were immediately in an uproar. Even if it was an ordinary case of murder, they could not afford to be careless. At a critical juncture when the various countries were paying tribute, A citizen of another country had been killed in the Great Zhou. The impact would be even worse. If they were not careful, it would incite conflict between countries. This was especially so when the Xin kingdom was already disloyal. They could use this as an excuse. Mr. Mei walked out from behind the curtains and said, "Your Majesty, please move to the Ziwei Palace and order the Ministry of Justice to immediately bring the people involved in this case to the palace." Assistant Minister Yang of the Ministry of Justice stood out and said respectfully, "Yes, Your Majesty." After that, he strode out of the hall and quickly walked out of the palace. Ministry of Justice. A group of people gathered outside the Ministry of Justice and discussed animatedly. That citizen of the Xin kingdom clearly fell on his own and hit the stone steps. He can't blame anyone else. But if that young man didn't chase after him, he wouldn't have fallen. Nonsense. If he didn't steal, would others chase after him? But he's dead in the end, and he's from another country. I'm afraid that young man will have to pay with his life. Within the Ministry of Justice, Assistant Minister Yang looked at Wei Peng and sighed. He said, "The envoy of the Xin kingdom is using this opportunity to make a statement. If this matter isn't handled well, I'm afraid that something big will happen." "Where's that criminal?" "I have to bring him to the palace." Wei Peng nodded and said, "He's in the prison. I'll go get him." He walked into the prison of the Ministry of Justice and opened a cell door. He said to a pale-faced young man, "Let's go. I'm afraid this is your only chance to enter the palace in your life." The young man's face was filled with despair. He said in a trembling voice, "Sir, I don't want to die yet." Wei Peng glanced at him and asked, "Why do you want to die?" The young man's body trembled. He said with infinite regret, "If I didn't chase after him, he wouldn't have died." Wei Peng asked in return, "You were just in a hurry. When did you chase after him?" Chapter 430. Outside the prison. The Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Justice, Yang Lin, shook his head at Wei Peng and said, "It's useless. Once we reach the Golden Palace, we just need to search his soul and the truth will be revealed. Have you forgotten what happened 5 years ago?" Wei Peng patted the thick law of the Great Zhou in his arms. He looked at the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Justice and said meaningfully, "Sir, times have changed." The Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Justice sighed and said, "I don't know if times have changed or not. I only know that during this year of tribute, the Xin kingdom has always had ulterior motives. They will definitely use this as a pretext to make a fuss. This time they will definitely not let go of this opportunity." He patted Wei Peng's shoulder and said, "Let's go. You also go to the palace. You know more about this case than I do. When we reach the palace, be careful what you say." The young man looked nervously at Wei Peng and asked, "Sir, I have never been to the palace. What should I do later?" Wei Peng said indifferently, "It's very simple. When we reach the palace, don't say or do anything." Palace, Crepe Myrtle Palace. Today's lunch banquet was already nearing its end. After the emergency of the Xin kingdom people dying in the Great Zhou's Shindu, the important officials of the Great Zhou all moved to the Crepe Myrtle Palace. The envoys of the various countries also followed. At this time, most of the officials still didn't know what had happened. Soon, the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Justice brought 2 people into the palace. After the report, everyone knew what had happened. This Xin kingdom person had stolen a precious piece of jewelry from a jade shop in the Shindu. After being discovered by the shopkeeper, he fled through the door. The shopkeeper went out to chase after the thief, but because of his old age, he was left further and further behind by the thief. A passerby saw injustice on the road and helped the shopkeeper chase after the thief from the Xin kingdom. Unexpectedly, the thief panicked and accidentally fell. Coincidentally, his head hit the top of the stone steps on the street. Immediately, his brain splattered and he died. As a result, the courageous citizen of the Great Zhou became the murderer of this person. In the palace, many of the officials of the Great Zhou had extremely gloomy expressions. Every time the various countries paid tribute, other than diplomatic missions, there would also be some merchants accompanying them, bringing goods from various countries to be sold in the divine capital. In the beginning, when Great Zhou was at its peak, all countries, regardless of whether they were diplomatic missions or merchants, were well-behaved and abided by the laws of Great Zhou. They didn't dare to do anything that violated the law. But in the past 50 years, with the decline of Great Zhou's national power, the intervals between tributes from other countries gradually increased, and the tributes gradually decreased. The actions of foreigners in Great Zhou also became more and more unbridled. By the time of the previous emperor, Great Zhou had completely lost the spirit of a great country. Furthermore, in order to rope in these small countries and prevent them from leaving the Great Zhou while he was in power, the previous emperor even gave them a lot of preferential treatment. From the beginning, merchants from other countries were exempted from all taxes in the Great Zhou, to indulging them in breaking the law and even committing crimes within the Great Zhou's borders. The law of Great Zhou could govern the citizens of Great Zhou, but it couldn't govern the citizens of other countries. This caused the previous emperor's reign to be the most aggrieved period for the citizens and officials of Great Zhou. This aggrieved feeling reached its peak 5 years ago. 5 years ago, the last time the various countries paid tribute, a merchant from the Xin nation raped a woman in the divine capital and was injured by a righteous man. The Xin nation diplomatic mission flew into a rage and threatened that if Great Zhou didn't give them a satisfactory explanation, they would sever their tributes with Great Zhou. In order to maintain stability, the previous emperor publicly executed that righteous man, but released the criminal from the Xin nation. This became the most humiliating diplomatic incident in the history of Great Zhou. It forcefully broke the backbone of the citizens of Great Zhou, causing the citizens of other countries, especially those from the Xin nation, to act recklessly in Great Zhou. However, the citizens of Great Zhou didn't dare to voice their anger. 5 years later, this scene repeated itself once again. Perhaps Xingua had done it on purpose. In the Crepe Myrtle Palace, the Xin nation diplomatic mission said with a cold expression, "A citizen of my Xin nation died in your Great Zhou. The Great Zhou court must severely punish the murderer and give us an explanation." At this moment, under the gazes of the people in the imperial court, a figure slowly stepped forward. Wei Peng looked at the Xin nation diplomatic mission and asked, "Murderer? What murderer?" The Xin nation diplomatic mission said, "Of course it's the murderer who caused the deaths of our citizens." Wei Peng shook his head and said, "A merchant from your country committed a theft in the Great Zhou's divine capital. When he was escaping, he accidentally fell and hit the stairs and died. What does this have to do with others? How can there be a murderer?" The Xin nation diplomatic mission said coldly, "Who are you? What does this have to do with this case?" Wei Peng said indifferently, "I am the head of the Ministry of Justice, Wei Peng. I have been invited by my client to act as his defense in this case. I will speak on his behalf." The Xin nation diplomatic mission pondered for a while before he understood that this official from the Great Zhou was trying to exonerate this person. His expression became even more unfriendly as he said, "Even if he stole first according to the laws of your Great Zhou, this crime does not warrant death. If that person did not chase after him, he would not have died. In the end, this person is still the murderer who caused his death." When the Xin nation diplomatic mission said this, the officials in the imperial court could already confirm that the Xin nation had come prepared this time. They actually knew the laws of the Great Zhou so well. If this kind of thing happened to a citizen of the Great Zhou, it would be somewhat unclear. Furthermore, it was a foreigner. This case became somewhat difficult to judge. At this moment, Wei Peng looked calmly at the Xin nation diplomatic mission and asked, "Who said that my client was chasing after him? My client was just in a hurry. Your merchant was panicking and died from hitting the stairs. What does this have to do with my client?" When Wei Peng's words came out, whether it was the officials in the imperial court or the envoys from the various countries, they were all stunned. This reason was really amazing. Prince Shou was so shocked that his mouth opened wide. He said in surprise, "This kid is a talent." The Xin nation diplomatic mission quickly reacted and said coldly, "He was running while shouting, 'Stop,' and 'Don't run.' Could it be that he was also in a hurry?" Wei Peng said indifferently, "He was in a hurry and was thirsty. He happened to see a vendor carrying tea and wanted to ask for a cup of fermented rice wine to quench his thirst. Is that not allowed?" The Xin nation diplomatic mission glanced at him and said coldly, "You can quibble. As long as you let us search his soul, the truth will naturally be revealed." Impudent. Another figure walked out from the crowd. Zhang Chun's face darkened as he said loudly, "Who do you think you are? A barbarian country. Are you worthy of searching the souls of my Great Zhou's citizens?" After the various countries' envoys arrived in the Great Zhou, they realized that the Great Zhou had changed greatly in the past few years. Naturally, they did a detailed investigation of the Great Zhou court. They all knew the identity of the person who was reprimanding the Xin nation diplomatic mission. Zhang Chun was the left assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel and the minister of Imperial Ancestral Temple. He was loyal to the Empress of the Great Zhou and did not belong to either the old or the new party. At the same time, he was also the most loyal dog under the powerful minister Li Mu. The Xin nation diplomatic mission's face was extremely cold. He gritted his teeth and said, "The citizens of the Xin nation died in the Great Zhou's Shindu. Is this the attitude of the Great Zhou?" After a short silence, a majestic voice finally came from behind the curtain at the front of the hall. The people of the Xin nation stole first and accidentally fell to their deaths while escaping. They brought this upon themselves and cannot blame others. There is no need to discuss this further. The Empress's voice echoed in the hall. In the end, she only left 2 words: "Court dismissed." The Empress's words undoubtedly determined the nature of this case. After the court was dismissed, the officials of the Great Zhou walked out of the crepe myrtle hall and couldn't help but straighten their backs. Although the Great Zhou had been the most powerful country on the Zhou continent for the past 100 years, it had been a long time since they had straightened their backs in front of the envoys of these small countries. At this moment, there was only one thought in the minds of the many officials. The Empress was mighty. The envoys of the various countries walked out behind the Great Zhou officials with different expressions on their faces. It had also been a long time since they had seen such a powerful Great Zhou. The Empress of the Great Zhou did not give any face to the Xin nation. She did not even search the soul of the Great Zhou citizen and directly ended the case. She was not afraid of the threats of the Xin nation diplomatic mission and did not give them a chance. They had once thought that the Great Zhou's national fortune had declined and would not last long after a woman ascended to the throne, reversing yin and yang and reversing the universe. No one had expected the Empress of the Great Zhou to be so powerful. They once again felt the aura of the ruler of the Zhou continent from her. The Xin nation diplomatic mission left without a word. It was not until this moment that they realized that the Great Zhou of today was no longer the Great Zhou of 5 years ago. The man from the Yong kingdom breathed a sigh of relief and said, 5 years ago the people of the Great Zhou were cold and heartless. They did not help the elderly on the road and they did not stand up for injustice. I once saw with my own eyes that the people of the Xin nation dragged a woman from the Great Zhou into a dark alley. The onlookers ignored them. I did not expect that 5 years later, a frail scholar would have the courage to step forward. The times have truly changed. The seriously ill lion of the Great Zhou has once again stood up. The young man beside him took a deep breath. The dignified voice of the Empress of the Great Zhou still echoed in his ears. He raised his head and resolutely said, "There will be a day when I will also become that kind of person." After the envoys of the various countries returned to the Chamberlain of Dependencies, they closed their doors and did not leave. This trip to the Great Zhou was full of surprises. They needed to plan carefully. Li Mu did not go to the Chang'e Palace. Instead, he walked out of the Imperial Palace with the other officials. Outside the Imperial Palace, there were already many commoners waiting to see what was going on. They did not dare to approach the other officials. When they saw Li Mu come out, they immediately surrounded him, all of them talking at once. "Official Li, how was it? How did Her Imperial Majesty decide? Will that righteous man pay with his life?" Li Mu looked at their earnest gazes and smiled. "It's been so long. You all still don't understand Her Imperial Majesty's temperament. How could she allow us, the people of the Great Zhou, to be bullied by outsiders on our doorstep? Her Imperial Majesty has already said that the people of the Xin nation apologized first. They only have themselves to blame and deserve to die. It has nothing to do with others. That righteous and courageous young man has already been acquitted and will leave the Imperial Palace in a moment." The commoners around him all cheered and jumped for joy when they heard this. "That's great. Her Imperial Majesty is mighty." There were also some commoners who thought further and asked Li Mu worriedly, "Officially, if the people of the Xin nation use this as an excuse to stop paying tribute to the Great Zhou, what should we do?" Li Mu said calmly, "They can choose to pay tribute or not. If they don't pay tribute, would our Great Zhou not be the largest country in the Zhou continent? Great Zhou has vast lands and abundant resources. Do we lack their tributes?" The commoners were stunned for a moment. After thinking about it, they quickly came to their senses. "Official Li is right. Our Great Zhou has vast lands and abundant resources. Do we need their tributes? They can ride on our heads and ride roughshod over us. We don't need such tributes." If we take their tributes, we have to be bullied by them. We don't need their tributes. They can pay whoever they want. In order to record him well in the history books and to prevent the other countries from breaking away from the Great Zhou, the former emperor tolerated the other countries. God knows how much the people of Shindu suffered and how much suffering they suffered. When the merchants of other countries bullied the people of Shindu, the commoners dared not speak up. When the people of Shin raped women, the former emperor, who was muddle-headed, actually executed the righteous people who saw injustice. Great Zhou was a great country. As the people of Great Zhou, they could have been proud and arrogant. However, under the former emperor's muddle-headed policies, the commoners of Shindu were inferior to the people of other countries. The commoners had long had enough of this. Li Mu originally wanted to keep the tributes from the other countries. After all, it was the symbol of Great Zhou as the most powerful country in the Celestial Empire. After this incident, he had changed his mind. It was better not to ask for tributes. The former emperor wanted to use this method to gain a good reputation in the history books. However, he was scolded even more harshly by the historians. He was completely nailed to the pillar of shame in history. During his reign, the Great Zhou's national strength declined the fastest. The faith of the people declined the most. He even lost the throne of the Xiao family. If nothing went wrong, he would be the most humiliated emperor of the Xiao family. If he kept the tributes, the commoners would not praise him. If the empress did not want the tributes, she would have won back the dignity of the commoners. The commoners would not scold her. The tributes from the other countries should be paid willingly. They used the tributes in exchange for the protection of the Great Zhou. This was a kind of transaction. It was also their recognition of the strength of the Great Zhou. Li Mu had to let the commoners understand this principle. In the future, even if they did not pay the tributes, the commoners would not think it was the empress' fault. He looked at the commoners in front of him and said in a deep voice, "Everyone, remember that the former emperor has passed away for 5 years. Great Zhou is no longer the Great Zhou of the past. From now on, no matter where you are in the Great Zhou, you can straighten your backs. You are the people of the Great Zhou. Behind you is the most powerful country in the Zhou continent." When he said this, he used a trace of his dermic powers. His voice echoed in the ears of the surrounding people. Yes, the former emperor has passed away for 5 years. Now our emperor is Her Majesty the Empress. What right does a barbarian country have to ride on our heads? It should have been like this long ago. As the commoners thought about this, many of them breathed rapidly. Their eyes started to turn red. You are the people of the Great Zhou. No matter where you are, you can straighten your backs. They had been waiting for this sentence for a very, very long time. Lord Li was right. The former emperor had passed away for 5 years. The people of the Great Zhou could stand up. At this moment, all the commoners present subconsciously straightened their backs. Seeing the two people walking out of the palace gates, Li Mu said, "Lord Yang." The assistant minister of the Ministry of Justice immediately walked forward and asked, "Lord Li, what are your orders?" Li Mu said, "The Great Zhou laws are used to protect the people of the Great Zhou. From now on, no matter which country you are from, as long as you dare to violate the laws of the Great Zhou in the Great Zhou, you will be severely punished." The assistant minister of the Ministry of Justice immediately bowed. "I understand." Li Mu patted him on the shoulder and whispered, "You have a high rank. You don't have to call me I in the future." The assistant minister of the Ministry of Justice only gave a simple and honest smile. Rank did not explain everything. Everyone in the court knew that Lord Li and the Empress wore the same pants. It was not excessive to respect him as much as the Empress. Moreover, in his lifetime he still wanted to rely on Li Mu to get promoted and move to a bigger residence. At the palace gates, the commoners had already dispersed. Li Mu's words were still echoing in their minds. The news spread from 1 to 10 and from 10 to 100. It wouldn't be long before everyone in the fairy's capital knew what he had said. Not long after, in a restaurant. It was lunchtime. The restaurant's business was good and there were no empty seats. At some point, a few dark-skinned men wearing strange clothes walked into the restaurant. They glanced at the customers who were eating in the restaurant. One of them walked up to the counter and said to the manager in bad Great Zhou language, "We are from the Shin dynasty. Ask the rest of the people here to go out and arrange a good private room. We will serve all the dishes you have here." The manager of the restaurant had just heard Lord Li's words at the palace gates. He was overwhelmed with excitement. He glanced at the men and said coldly, "I've only heard of the Great Zhou. I've never heard of the Xian dynasty. Which barbarian country are you from? There is a seat in the corner over there. If you can sit, then sit. If you can't, then leave. Don't disturb our business here. The Xian dynasty merchant was used to running amok in the great show. This time he brought his friends with him. He did not expect the lowly commoners of the great show to be so impudent to him. His face instantly darkened. He said sternly, "How dare you? Do you know who you are talking to?" Bang. You want to stir up trouble? The manager slammed the abacus on the table and sneered, "Fellows, report this to the authorities." Inside the Chamberlain of Dependencies, in the courtyard where the young envoy resided, a middle-aged man stood on the roof, overlooking the entire divine capital. A strange light flashed in his eyes. The divine capital of the great show, which was surging with psychokinesis, shone with a golden light in his eyes. Chapter 431. The ambassadors of the various countries had come with a premeditated plan. They wanted to sever their relationship with the great show to further attack the people of the great show. It had been a tradition for the countries of the Zhou continent to pay tribute to the great show for more than a century. If the various countries declared independence, the great show would only exist in name as the strongest country on the Zhou continent. This would cause the people of the great show to continue to lose their support. If the people's support was lost, it would be difficult to gather the emperor's qi, and the royal family would be unable to produce new experts. It wouldn't be long before the great show went from decline to decline. This was something that the various countries were happy to see. However, when they walked out of the Honglu temple, they found that there were only a few figures on the streets that had been abnormally crowded yesterday. After some investigation, they found that the people of the divine capital had spontaneously gone to the ancestral temple to pay tribute. Because the people were paying tribute, the streets were empty. How united was the people of the divine capital? Under these circumstances, even if they stopped paying tribute, the impact on the people's support would be minimal. Even if they stopped paying tribute, it would instead cause the people of the great show to be more united. In the following half a day, the Ministry of Justice arrested dozens of foreign merchants who had violated the laws of the great show. They were flogged at the entrance of the Ministry of Justice, attracting countless people to watch. Their cheers could be heard from several streets away. There were also a few who had seriously violated the law and were likely to face several years of imprisonment. The ambassadors of the various countries protested this matter to the Great Zhou court, requesting that the Ministry of Justice release the relevant people, but they were rejected. One of the ambassadors of the Xian nation asked around and returned to the Honglu temple. He said to his companion, "I've asked around." When the memorial was delivered to the Great Zhou Secretariat, it was shot down. It was done by that Li Mu. This person is unmoved by force or persuasion. He's not afraid of anything. Another ambassador of the Xian nation thought for a moment, then said, "There's no other way. Let's just directly protest to the Empress of the Great Show. I don't believe that she's not afraid of us cutting off our tribute to the Great Show. If that happens, she'll become a sinner for all eternity." In the Changel Palace, Li Mu handed a memorial to the Empress, who was reading a book, and asked, "Your Majesty, the Xian nation's envoy threatened the imperial court. If we don't release them, they will cut off their tribute to the Great Show. How should I respond to them?" Zhou Yi flipped to a page and said indifferently, "Write a decree. From today onwards, the Great Show and the Xian nation will sever their tributes. Didn't they refuse to pay tribute? In the future they won't have to pay tribute anymore." Li Mu nodded and said, "As you wish." Not long after, Mr. Mei walked into the Honglu temple. His voice resounded in all directions. "Envoy of Xian country, receive the imperial edict." Two figures walked out of a courtyard and stood quietly in front of Mr. Mei. They sneered in their hearts. As expected, it was better to hand the memorial directly to the Empress of the Great Show. There was a result so quickly. That Li Mu didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth, but how could the Empress of the Great Show not know the importance of the big picture? Mr. Mei looked at them indifferently and said, "Her Majesty has decreed that the Xian nation's merchants are of inferior character and have violated many laws within the Great Show." The Xian nation's envoy did not restrain his people and instead made unreasonable demands of the Great Show court. From today onwards, the Great Show and the Xian nation will sever their tributes. Mr. Mei had already finished speaking, but the Xian nation's envoy was still frozen in place. Their most important mission this time was to sever their tributes to the Great Show. Now that they had achieved their goal, they didn't feel any sense of accomplishment. 5 years ago, the great Zhou Emperor gave them too many benefits and begged them to continue their tributes. 5 years later, the Empress of the Great Zhou took the initiative to sever the relationship between the two nations. After Mr. Mei finished reading the imperial edict, he floated away, leaving the envoys in the Honglu temple looking at each other. Although the imperial edict only mentioned the Xin nation, it also sent a message to all of them. The Empress of the Great Zhou didn't care about the tributes of the other nations. If they used this as a threat, they would probably end up like the Xin nation. From now on, everyone here would have to reconsider their relationship with the Great Zhou. Chang'e Palace. After learning that the Xin nation envoy had left the Honglu temple in anger, Li Mu's mouth twitched in disdain. The Empress wasn't so easily threatened. She had always been amenable to coaxing and not coercion. The Xin nation people had clearly miscalculated if they wanted to use the method of threatening the previous emperor to threaten her. She didn't even want to be the Empress of the Great Zhou, much less the overlord of Zhou province. If the other nations wanted to pay tributes, they could play by themselves. To the Empress, growing grass and flowers, playing airplane chess with Xiao Bai and Wan Wan, and painting with Li Mu were perhaps more attractive than these things. She didn't care about whether or not the other nations paid tributes. She even gave Li Mu full authority to receive the envoys. Regardless of the other nations' ulterior motives, the Great Zhou had to have the bearing of a great nation. Although there was no need to give them special privileges over the people of the Great Zhou, she still had to do her part as a host. According to the rules of previous years, after the imperial court banquet, the envoys would be taken on a tour of Xin, due to show off the glory of the great nation. During the month of tributes, the people of Xin, would wash the streets and paint the houses. This had already become a tradition. They strove to show the best of the Great Zhou in front of these small nations. In previous years, officials from the Ministry of Rites were in charge of this. Li Mu had never presided over this before. He specially came to the Ministry of Rites to consult the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Rites. How was this arranged in previous years? The Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Rites said, Lord Li, in the past, one of the 6 ministries and 9 temples would be chosen as the place for the envoys to visit. After the selection, they would be notified at least a day in advance so that the officials could make preparations. After he finished speaking, he asked again, Lord Li, which government office will we choose this time? Li Mu waved his hand and said, whatever. The next day at the entrance of the Department of Offerings, the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Rites looked at the envoys and said, This is the Department of Offerings of the Great Zhou. Everyone please. The envoys all had expressions of interest on their faces. In the past, the Great Zhou court would only allow them to visit the 6 ministries and 9 temples. This was the first time they were allowed to visit the Department of Offerings. The Department of Offerings was the place where the experts of a nation gathered. From the Department of Offerings, one could see the foundation and strength of a nation. The Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Rites led the crowd in slowly. They passed through the front yard of the Department of Offerings and came to an extremely wide open space. The Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Rites took the initiative to introduce. This is the place where the offerings practice their martial arts. On the open space, ripples of mana could be felt. At the very front, on a small slope, stood a human-shaped target. One of the worshippers who exuded the aura of the 5th tier waved his hand, and a dozen or so talismans flew out from his sleeves, creating a violent wave of spiritual energy that knocked down the human-shaped target and also raised the slope to the ground. This scene made the envoys' throats dry up. Every single one of those fulu was above the earth rank. These fulu talismans were hard to come by in their countries. Anyone who owned one would have to keep it as a life-saving trump card. The Great Zhou's offering was actually so extravagant as to use more than 10 earth-rank fulu talismans for target practice. This was too wasteful. Just from that attack just now, even a 6th-level cultivator would have to deal with it. Those below the 6th level would probably not even be able to escape with their primordial spirits. Another consecrator flicked his finger lightly, and a black pill-shaped object flew towards another human-shaped target. The 2 objects collided. After a strong spatial ripple, that human-shaped target was swallowed by a black hole in the void. Many people swallowed their saliva secretly. If this object landed on them, they probably would not be able to avoid the fate of being swallowed. This strange method of attack was simply unheard of. With his hands behind his back, Li Mu turned around and saw the shocked expressions of the crowd. He smiled and said, "Everyone, don't be nervous. The offering is just practicing against the enemy. It's all routine." In the next 2 hours, Li Mu brought the envoys to witness the routine of countless great shows offering. This included various powerful Fulu talismans, pills and formations made by many offering that could trap a 6th-level cultivator to death. In the past it would take 10 talisman liquids to draw 1 Fulu. Now that they could draw 10, the offering naturally did not have to be thrifty. They just needed to blow it up. If they did not have enough, they could ask for more. The imperial court was not lacking in Fulu now. In addition to spending thousands of Fulu talismans for the Empress, Li Mu and the Empress also refined some of the ancient pills that they had comprehended from the pages of Dao. They gave them to the offering so that they could familiarize themselves with using them in advance so that they could be more proficient against the enemy in the future. 2 hours later, the envoys walked out of the offering department. Their faces were somewhat pale. The scene that they saw in the offering department had left a deep impression on them. Was this the strength of the Zhou continent's overlord? Li Mu looked at them and said, "By the way, His Majesty has decreed that all countries no longer need to pay tribute to Great Zhou in the future. Great Zhou is still facing internal and external troubles. We really have no time to take care of the other countries. You may all return." The envoys from the small countries looked at each other, swallowed their saliva and immediately spoke. "We have to pay tribute, we have to pay tribute. We can't break the century-old rule. The state of Wei is loyal and devoted to Great Zhou. We will never be disloyal. We pledge our lives to follow Great Zhou." Chapter 432. It wasn't that the envoys from the small countries were spineless, but that they were truly frightened. It was one thing for Earth-rank Fulu to bombard indiscriminately, and it wasn't a big deal for unheard-of pill Dao attacks. It was possible to find flaws in a joint attack formation, but who had ever seen a wall covered with heaven-rank Fulu just for people to admire? That was a precious heaven-rank Fulu, not some cabbage. Before coming to the Great Zhou, they had come to the conclusion that the Great Zhou was going to fall. After visiting the Great Zhou's Department of Offerings, they deeply realized that the Great Zhou was the absolute king of the Zhou continent. They began to panic. Not long after Li Mu returned to the palace, the Ministry of Rites sent over a report. Just now, after the envoys from the small countries finished visiting the Department of Offerings, they immediately sent the list of tributes to the Ministry of Rites. These small countries were different from the other 6 countries. No matter how much the Great Zhou declined, it wasn't something they could contend against. The reason they didn't immediately offer tributes was because they were observing the other countries. After witnessing the power of the Great Zhou with their own eyes, they all put away their hesitation. In the Chamberlain of Dependencies, the envoys from the other countries gathered together, their hearts particularly complicated. The envoy from Liang sighed deeply and said, "I originally thought that the invasion of the Great Zhou was the beginning of its decline. I didn't expect that this would be their chance to rise again." The envoy from Yu said helplessly, "The Great Zhou is indeed the Great Zhou. Fortunately, we made sufficient preparations. Otherwise, it's very likely that we would have fallen to the same fate as the Shin Kingdom." After some hesitation, the envoys from Jiang and Jing also spoke up. "The tributes cannot be cut off. Not only must they not be cut off, but they must be restored to their former state. We must satisfy the Great Zhou." Only an hour later, Li Mu received another message. Liang, Yu, Jing, Jiang and Yong had also sent a list of tributes to the Ministry of Rites. They indicated that this was only the first batch of tributes, and that the second batch would arrive within half a year. In the Chang'e Palace, the Empress, who was reading a book while reclining on her dragon throne, snorted coldly and said, "Have the Ministry of Rites send the items back. The Great Zhou does not lack this bit of tribute, nor do we need them to pay tribute." Li Mu hurriedly said, "Your Majesty, please reconsider. Please reconsider. Do you still want to grow flowers and plants as soon as possible?" Although Zhou Yi disdained to pay attention to the capricious people of the other countries, what Li Mu said was what she cared about the most. Accepting tributes from the other countries was good for rallying the people's hearts. She picked up the book again and waved her hand. "Forget it, I don't care anymore. You decide." Li Mu said, "Then I will accept their tributes on behalf of your Majesty." Although the tributes from the other countries didn't make much of a difference to the national treasury, it made a big difference to the people of the Great Zhou, who didn't want their motherland to be strong. Accepting tributes from the other countries could strengthen the cohesion of the people, increase the happiness of the people, and increase their psychokinesis and speed up the condensation of imperial qi. If the empress wanted to retire from her position as empress soon and spend her old age with Li Mu, it was best not to be willful. Li Mu had just finished drafting the edict when Mr. Mei walked in and said, "Your Majesty, an envoy from the Yong Kingdom is outside the palace, requesting an audience." Zhou Yi put down her book and sat up from her dragon throne. "What is the Yong Kingdom doing here?" she asked. Mr. Mei shook his head. "I don't know. Does your Majesty wish to see them?" Zhou Yi thought for a moment, then said, "Have them wait outside the imperial study." The Changel Palace was her sleeping quarters. She generally didn't receive foreign officials here. Zhou Yi stood up, glanced at Li Mu and said, "Come with us." Among the 6 countries, the Yong Kingdom wasn't the strongest, but it had the most prospects. The 4 countries of Liang, Yu, Jiang, and Jing relied on the support of the 4 Daoist sections. Without the 4 Daoist sects, the Yong Kingdom would immediately be reduced to a low-tier country. The Xin Kingdom was the birthplace of Buddhism. It wasn't small and had a large population. However, there were too many internal problems and the quality of the people was generally low. The Great Zhou had once thought the Xin Kingdom to be very powerful, but after fighting it once, they discovered that the Xin Kingdom was only strong on the outside but weak on the inside. Only the Yong Kingdom's strength was truly powerful. Disregarding everything else, a country with less than a tenth of the Great Zhou's population had condensed 3 strands of Emperor's Qi within 50 years, creating 3 transcending mortality experts for the Yong Kingdom. The Great Zhou had 10 times the population of the Yong Kingdom and was known as the strongest country on the Zhou continent. Yet, in the same amount of time, it had barely managed to condense 1 strand of Emperor's Qi. Just based on this, the Great Zhou's previous emperor and the previous emperor would be ashamed even if they were lying in their coffins. It wasn't hard to guess how condensed the Yong Kingdom's people's Qi was. A single country had produced 5 generations of wise emperors. If he hadn't transmigrated, it wasn't impossible for the Yong Kingdom to defeat the Great Zhou and unify the Zhou continent several decades later. The Imperial Study. This was the place where the Empress received foreign officials outside of the morning court session. The layout was very similar to the Ziwei Palace. The Empress stood behind a curtain while Li Mu stood in the middle of the hall. Before long, Mr. Mei led 2 people into the study. One was a middle-aged man and the other was a young man. They were the envoys sent by the Yong Kingdom. The middle-aged man cupped his hands and bowed to the Empress, saying, "Greetings, Your Imperial Majesty, the Empress of the Great Zhou." The Empress asked from behind the curtain, "Envoys from the Yong Kingdom, what business do you have with us?" The middle-aged man replied, "Before this subject came to the Great Zhou, I was ordered by the Emperor to request a mutual waiver of tariffs between the Great Zhou and the Yong Kingdom in order to promote friendly trade between the 2 countries." The Empress's voice quickly reached Li Mu's ears. "What do you think?" Mutual waiver of tariffs between the 2 countries had both advantages and disadvantages. If they retained their advantages and curbed their disadvantages, it would be a good thing for the people of both countries. The Yong Kingdom's monarch clearly had foresight that others didn't possess. Li Mu stepped forward and said, "This matter still needs to be discussed in detail. I will give you an answer in a few days." The middle-aged man cupped his hands and said, "This is a matter that will benefit the people of both countries. I hope Your Imperial Majesty will be able to judge this matter clearly. We will quietly await the good news." Not long after, the 2 men withdrew from the imperial study. The Empress walked out from behind the curtain and said, "This matter." Li Mu replied, "Leave this matter to this subject." The Empress looked at Li Mu with satisfaction before finding Xiao Bai, Wan Wan and the others to play mahjong. Li Mu remained in the imperial study, pondering over the matter that the Yong Kingdom's envoy had just spoken of. At the very least, the removal of trade barriers between the 2 countries was beneficial to the common people. They could use cheaper prices to purchase goods from the other country. However, if they didn't control it well, it would be a devastating blow to the merchants of their own country. Which goods should have their tariffs reduced? Which goods should have their tariffs reduced? How to reduce them? How to reduce them? How to reduce them? Li Mu first went to the Ministry of Revenue. After spending a few days doing his homework, he already had some ideas. He arrived at the Chamberlain of Dependencies and knocked on a courtyard door. The one who opened the door was the young man from the Yong Kingdom's envoy. When he saw Li Mu, his expression froze, appearing somewhat flustered. Li Mu strolled into the courtyard. Glancing around, he saw an easel propped up in the courtyard. On the canvas, a painting was nearly completed. It depicted an extremely handsome man, about as handsome as Li Mu. When he looked again, wasn't the man in the painting himself. After staring blankly for a moment, Li Mu seemed to have thought of something. Turning around, he stared at the young man and asked in an unfriendly tone, "Why did you draw this official's portrait? Are you planning to find an assassin to assassinate this official after returning to your country?" If not for Li Mu, the other countries would have been able to laugh at the ridiculousness of the Great Zhou, especially Great Yong. In the future, Great Yong would have the possibility of unifying the Zhou continent. If one had to say who they hated the most, it would naturally be him. The Yong kingdom's envoy had drawn his portrait for no apparent reason. Li Mu had enough reason to suspect that this person harbored evil intentions. Hearing his words, the young man became even more flustered. Promptly shaking his head, he said, No, I drew it casually." "Casually drew it?" Li Mu glanced at the painting again. The painting had both form and spirit, and it was extremely lifelike. In particular, the expression in the eyes was no different from that of a real person. It gave one the impression that the person in the painting would walk out of the painting at any moment. If this was called a casual drawing, then what were Li Mu's recent paintings called? At this moment, Li Mu felt that he had been insulted. Chapter 433. Casually drawn? Li Mu shot him a disdainful glance and said, "Why don't you casually draw another one for me to see?" To draw such a likeness of him and use such a careless reason, it was hard for Li Mu not to suspect that he had some other motive. Could it be that he really wanted to assassinate him? The young man walked to the drawing board, took off the canvas and covered it with a new piece. He held a brush in his hand, and after he landed it on the canvas, he quickly drew something. It was so fast that Li Mu could only see the afterimage. After a moment, the youth put down the brush in his hand, and another Li Mu appeared on the canvas. Compared to the previous Li Mu, the likeness was even more vivid and lifelike. Li Mu was dumbstruck, as if he was looking at another him. He even had the misconception that the person in the painting had taken a step forward. Li Mu quickly discovered that this was not a misconception. One of the legs of the man in the painting really stepped out, and a man who looked exactly like Li Mu appeared in front of him. Although this was only a paper person that quickly faded away, Li Mu sensed a trace of the painting Dao from it. The painting had become real. This was the ultimate technique of the painting Dao, creating something from nothing. As his emotions churned, the youth took out a dozen or so paintings from his room and spread them out in front of Li Mu. He said, "I casually drew these. I had no intention of harming you. I was only practicing." These dozen or so paintings included scenery and people. The scenery was of the divine capital, and the people depicted the various states of the divine capital. However, this was no longer important. This young envoy's cultivation was not high, but he actually knew the painting Dao. It was truly a case of wearing out iron shoes in a fruitless search, only to find it by chance without any effort. He definitely knew the basics of the painting Dao. Li Mu had been longing for this for a long time. Li Mu's mind raced, but his expression regained its calm. He said, "Enough. This official believes you." Hearing this, the youth from Yong breathed a sigh of relief. Li Mu did not mention this matter again. He asked, "As for the matter of the mutual reduction of tariffs and friendly trade between the two countries, it still needs to be discussed. Where is the person in charge of the Yong diplomatic mission?" The youth replied, "The ambassador is not present. This humble one can make the decision on this matter." Li Mu sized him up with an odd look. This young envoy was young, but the authority he wielded was not small. After the two were seated, Li Mu got straight to the point and said, "After the discussions of my court's ministers, everyone unanimously believes that the mutual reduction of tariffs between the two countries will not benefit our Great Zhou. On the contrary, it will intensify competition and attack our merchants. It will also reduce local taxes. Out of the protection of our Great Zhou's merchants and local taxes, the officials of the Ministry of Revenue do not agree to the mutual reduction of tariffs between the two countries." The young Yong envoy argued, "This humble one believes otherwise. The mutual reduction of tariffs will make goods cheaper. This will be beneficial to the common people as it will allow them to buy what they need at a lower price. Although this will intensify the competition between merchants to a certain extent, An appropriate amount of competition is beneficial to the development of commerce. This will benefit the people of both countries. If tariffs are reduced, it will inevitably attract even more merchants, and local taxes will only increase, not decrease. Li Mu regretfully said. This official has no choice but to admit that your noble country's proposal is very good. This official also fully approves of it. However, this official's words carry little weight. I cannot oppose the entire Ministry of Revenue unless... The youth's eyes brightened. He asked, unless what? Li Mu replied, unless someone can convince His Imperial Majesty. If His Imperial Majesty agrees, then the Ministry of Revenue's opinion will not be important. The youth stood up and bowed to Li Mu. He earnestly said, this is a matter beneficial to the people of Great Zhou. Darren Li is deeply loved and respected by the common people. I ask that Darren Li consider the common people of both countries and facilitate cooperation between the two countries. Li Mu sighed. Although this official shares your thoughts, I cannot disregard the opinions of the entire Ministry of Revenue and speak before His Imperial Majesty. Otherwise, won't this official become a treacherous official who bewitches His Imperial Majesty into making arbitrary decisions? The youth replied, the eyes of the common people are as clear as snow. If Darren Li is a treacherous official, then there will be no loyal officials in the Great Zhou. When he said this, his tone was somewhat complicated. They had actually made 2 preparations for their trip to the Great Zhou. If the Great Zhou was an arrow at the end of its flight, they would break off the tributes and wait for the day when the Great Zhou collapsed. Then Great Yong would find an opportunity to dominate the Zhou continent. If the Great Zhou was still powerful, they would abandon the first plan and strengthen trade and cooperation with the Great Zhou, vigorously develop the domestic economy, and raise the standard of living of the common people. Li Mu sighed. This official truly wishes to help but is powerless to do so. The courtiers already have complaints about His Imperial Majesty's favor and trust in this official. If this official opposes the Ministry of Revenue again, who knows what they will say about this official behind my back? Perhaps they will say that this official was bribed by the state of Yong and received benefits from you, harming the interests of the Great Zhou. Speaking on your behalf, isn't this the same as framing this official as being heartless and unjust? He looked at the young envoy and said, for this matter, you will have to personally seek out Her Imperial Majesty. Disappointed, the young man replied, Darren Li is Her Imperial Majesty's most favored subject. If your words are useless, then even if we seek an audience with Her Imperial Majesty, it will be futile. Li Mu did not speak. His face revealed a contemplative expression as if he was hesitating. A moment later he looked back at the young envoy and said, this official is fully aware that friendly trade between the two countries is greatly beneficial to both the people of the two countries and the court. Although this official is unable to directly help you due to my status, I can point you in the right direction. The young man's eyes lit up again. Cupping his fist he said, please advise me, Darren Li. Li Mu looked at him and asked, you should know that Her Imperial Majesty is very interested in painting, right? The young man nodded. I saw it a few days ago. The paintings hanging on the walls of Her Imperial Majesty's study are authentic works by Zhou Xian. Even when the Empress mentioned the art sage, her tone was respectful. However, this young man from the Yong Kingdom directly called him by his name, not even adding the word sage. Perhaps there really was something to him. Li Mu casually asked, if my guess is correct, you should be cultivating in painting, right? The young man did not deny it. Nodding, he replied, yes. Li Mu unhurriedly said, from what I know, Her Imperial Majesty is very fond of painting. Moreover, she is deeply in love with the art sage's authentic works. For many years she has been searching for the lost inheritance of painting. If you can fulfill Her Imperial Majesty's wish, then the matter of trade will not be a problem. After saying this, he slowly stood up and said, this official's words end here. I can't say anything more. Think about it yourselves. Finished speaking, he turned and left. The middle-aged man walked out of the room. The young man raised his head to look at him and asked, Royal Uncle, what should we do? The middle-aged man did not answer. Instead he asked, what do you think? After thinking it over, the young man said, reducing tariffs and opening up trade with Great Zhou is a blessing for the common people of Great Yong. Although painting is an important part of the heavenly tomes, it is not that it cannot be taught to outsiders. Daoist cultivators are all aware of this. In the past thousands of years, they have become even more powerful. It is precisely because the other sects do not teach it to outsiders that they have declined. The middle-aged man smiled and said, "Since you have already made your decision, there is no need to ask me." Recalling Li Mu's reminder, the young man sighed with emotion and said, "No wonder Great Zhou has risen again so quickly. The Empress of Great Zhou looks down on the other countries, possessing the spirit of a celestial empire. The officials she has placed in important positions also have such insight. They are intelligent and not lacking in ingenuity. Most importantly, they have the hearts of the common people, establishing their hearts for the heavens and earth and establishing their lives for the common people. A real man born between the heavens and earth should be like this. It is a pity that he was not born in my Great Yong." The middle-aged man also sighed and said, "The Empress of Great Zhou has exceptional insight. If the previous Emperor of Great Zhou had been at death's door for another 10 years, or if the Great Zhou family had not seized the imperial aura and seized power, then today's Great Zhou would not be like this. Everything is predestined." Li Mu walked out of the Chamberlain of Dependencies and leisurely strolled through the streets. The streets were bustling with activity. Li Mu patiently responded to the greetings of the common people along the way. Along the way he bought 3 sticks of Tonghulu. Thinking of Wanwan, he hesitated for a moment before buying 3 more sticks. Afterwards he continued to walk forward. This time, after walking for a short while, he heard a voice behind him. "Officially, please wait." Li Mu turned his head to look at the young man and asked, "Is there anything else?" The young man handed a letter to Li Mu and said, "I request officially to deliver this to Her Imperial Majesty, the Empress." Li Mu accepted the letter and nodded his head. It just so happens that this official needs to make a trip to the palace. The young Yong envoy cupped his hands in gratitude and said, "Thank you for your advice, official Li." Li Mu waved his hand and said, "It is all for the common people." Chapter 434. Changel Palace. Li Mu handed the letter from the Yong envoy to the Empress. "Your Imperial Majesty," the Yong envoy asked this subject to deliver this letter to Your Imperial Majesty. "Please take a look, Your Imperial Majesty." Zhou Yi was eating Tonghulu and didn't accept the letter. "We don't have time right now. Open it yourself and see what's written on it." Li Mu opened the letter and took out a piece of paper. Sweeping his eyes over it, he whispered, as expected. At the top of the paper were the words Painting Sutra written in large letters, followed by a line of small letters that read, "Divine Brush Ling Ling opening to Shangqing Liujia Fu Wei Song Luding Ding. I am now a calligraphy seal concealing my body, meeting gold, meeting fire, fire hiding in the earth, the heavenly emperor, the sage." This letter contained the formula for the Tao of painting. Only by using this formula could one display the Tao of painting. As expected, the Tao of painting was also a type of Daoist technique. It didn't create objects out of thin air. It was between illusion and reality, yet it was more brilliant than both. It possessed more of a bewitching nature than Daoist techniques, and at the same time, it possessed a power that illusion didn't possess. After pondering for a moment, Li Mu took out his brush and drew a simple rune in the air. This time, a golden rune finally lit up in the air in front of him. In the next moment, the rune transformed into a golden thread that bound Shangguan Li's body. Shangguan Li coldly snorted and puffed out her chest. The golden thread collapsed, but at least it proved that Li Mu's conjecture was correct. By using the Tao of painting in the Fulu, ancient talisman techniques could be reproduced. Although the two were fundamentally different, the Tao of painting borrowed the power of heaven and earth. It didn't consume much of one's transcendence energy and it could last longer in battle. The premise was that one had to simultaneously cultivate both Daoist techniques. Li Mu and the Empress studied for a few years and would certainly be able to better utilize the Tao of painting in the Fulu. With the Yong Kingdom's sincerity, Li Mu ordered the Chamberlain of Dependencies to hold a banquet and invite the Yong Kingdom's envoys to discuss the details of the friendly relations between the two countries. The countries in Zhou province needed to pay tribute to Great Zhou, but the tariffs between Great Zhou and the other countries were not light. In order to win over the other countries, the former emperor exempted them from the tariffs. It was only after the Empress ascended the throne that the tariffs returned to normal. This was the first time in history that the Great Zhou and the state of Yong had established trade cooperation at the national level. After the banquet ended, the Assistant Minister of Revenue walked out of the Chamberlain of Dependencies with a face full of doubt. He muttered, Could it be that this official has offended the young envoys? Why do I feel that they have a problem with this official? Li Mu chuckled and said, Assistant Minister, you're thinking too much. I didn't feel anything at all. Perhaps it's just your imagination. The Assistant Minister of Revenue nodded and said, This official must have thought too much. Finished speaking, he left with his doubts. The young envoy walked out of the Chamberlain of Dependencies and cupped his hands in greeting to Li Mu. This humble one, on behalf of the king and the people of the state of Yong, thanks Li Darren for your kindness in guiding us. In the future, if Li Darren has the opportunity to come to my state of Yong, this humble one will do his best as a host. Li Mu nodded and said, Let's talk about it again in the future. After watching Li Mu leave, he sighed softly and said, If only he had been born in my state of Yong. The middle-aged man indifferently replied, This is the fate of the nation. It cannot be forced. The month of tribute ended and the envoys of the various countries returned to their countries. This time's tribute was different from the past. As the sovereign state, Great Zhou had once again established its prestige and status on the Zhou continent. Although it had severed its tributary relationship with the Xin kingdom, one of the 6 neighboring countries, the public opinion had risen to a new height. In the past few tributes, the people of the Xin kingdom had committed numerous crimes in the divine capital under the deliberate cover of the previous emperor, creating a psychological shadow in the hearts of the common people. Great Zhou had taken the initiative to sever its tributary relationship with the Xin kingdom, but it had also reconnected with the common people. Li Mu had already asked the empress to announce this matter to the world and change the laws. From now on, within the borders of the Great Zhou dynasty, no matter which country they were from, they would be treated equally and punished according to the laws of the Great Zhou dynasty. The purpose of this move was to tell the people of the Great Zhou that the era of the previous emperor was gone forever. The people of the Great Zhou could now stand up again. The Zhu Wei's spies in the Xin kingdom also passed on some information. A citizen of the Xin kingdom had died in Great Zhou. The Great Zhou court had sheltered and connived at the criminal, severed its tributary relationship with the Xin kingdom, and even arrested a few merchants from the Xin kingdom. After the Xin kingdom's envoys returned, they spread the news throughout the Xin kingdom. Very quickly it caused a huge uproar. All over the Xin kingdom, citizens began to gather and march, demanding that the Great Zhou hand over the murderer. A portion of the people of the Xin kingdom destroyed the goods they had bought from the merchants of the Great Zhou. They also initiated a nationwide boycott of the merchants of the Great Zhou and the goods of the Great Zhou. There were also some people of the Xin kingdom who declared that the power of the Xin kingdom had long surpassed that of the Great Zhou. They said that they would soon go to war with the Great Zhou, and that the declining Great Zhou would be unable to resist the brave soldiers of the Xin kingdom. In less than a month they would be able to fight their way to the Great Zhou's divine capital. The Xin kingdom's imperial court didn't respond to this. The Xin kingdom was already in chaos, but in the Great Zhou there wasn't the slightest ripple. When the news reached the Great Zhou, all the court officials didn't even have the mood to discuss it. Li residence. With the formation closed, Li Mu held a brush in his hand and drew a door on the wall. He easily pushed the door open and walked out. Soon after, he closed the door and the wall returned to its original state. Li Mu then activated the formation and stood outside the formation. Using the brush, a gap quickly appeared in the protective formation of the Li residence. It was as if Li Mu had opened a hole, allowing him to easily walk into the formation. After several days of trial and error, Li Mu had figured out other uses of the Dao of painting. Aside from being used to draw talismans, the Dao of painting could also be used to break through formations and pass through walls. It was practically unstoppable. No matter how sturdy a wall was, a door could be opened. Opening a hole in an ordinary formation was even easier. The Dao of painting wasn't the strongest offensive ability, but it was superior in its strangeness. Opening a hole in a formation was something that no other Dao could accomplish. Once Li Mu's attainments in the Dao of painting caught up to that youth from the Yong kingdom or the Empress, he would be able to use this Dao to do even more things. In the past few days, Li Mu's life had been fulfilling and meaningful. At the same time, he cultivated 4 Daos: Dao, Buddhism, Yao, and painting. Every day, aside from dealing with memorials and daily cultivation, he also had to temper his body with Shangguan Li in the astral winds of the 9 heavens. He also had to learn painting from the Empress. He didn't even have much time to accompany Wanwan and Xiaobai. During dinner today, Li Mu noticed that Wan ate one bowl less than usual. It wasn't just dinner. It seemed that her appetite hadn't been very good these past few days. Yesterday she even ate less candied haws. He had been busy cultivating these past few days and had neglected her. Before going to bed at night, Li Mu looked at Wan, who seemed to have something on her mind, and asked softly, "What's wrong? Did someone make you angry?" Wan shook her head and whispered, "No, it's just that I miss." Chapter 435. The Empress could temporarily keep Wan's mouth, but she could not keep her heart forever. For as long as she could remember, she had been by Lu Hanyan's side. After being separated from her for so long, she was naturally not used to it. Lu Hanyan and Li Qing were now at Mount Baiyin. They were being nurtured as the next head. They needed to cultivate diligently every day and could not return to the divine capital. However, this could not go on. In order to reinvigorate Wan, Li Mu planned to send her back to Lu Hanyan's side. After the envoys left, there was nothing much to do in the imperial court. Li Mu could also make a trip back to Mount Baiyin. In Chang'e Palace, Li Mu finished dealing with the last memorial. He turned around and said to the Empress, "Your Majesty, I need to send Wan back to Mount Baiyin. I will be back in a month at the latest." Zhou put down her book and asked, "It's just a trip to the North County. Will it take a month?" Li Mu said, "A few days ago the Office of Consecration received news that a fox demon was causing trouble in Zhejiang County. The local government was unable to suppress it. I can go investigate on the way. It might take a few days." Zhou was a little dispirited. She said, "Then you can go." Li Mu stood up and bowed. "I will take my leave first." Walking out of Chang'e Palace, Li Mu held Wan's hand in one hand and Xiao Bai's hand in the other. He prepared to return to the Li residence to pack up and leave early the next morning. Wan was not as happy as Li Mu imagined. More specifically, she was happy one moment and sad the next. Li Mu could not help but pinch her face. He asked, "I'm going to take you to see your young miss. Are you still not happy?" Wan sighed. "I'm happy," Li Mu asked. "Happy? Why are you sighing?" Wan said worriedly, "There are only vegetables and tofu in the mountains. I haven't finished tasting the dishes in Sister Zhou's imperial kitchen." There were 36 counties in the Great Zhou, and each county had hundreds to thousands of local dishes. The imperial kitchen had gathered all the famous chefs in the 36 counties, and new dishes were constantly being introduced. It was impossible to try all the dishes. Li Mu was suddenly curious and asked Wan, "If you can only stay in one place in the future, would you be willing to stay by your young miss side in Mount Baiyin, or would you be willing to stay by Big Sister Zhou's side in the imperial palace?" Wan froze for a moment, then began to pinch her fingers. At this moment it often meant that she was in a dilemma. After thinking for a long time, she raised her head and asked, "Can't Miss come to live with us in the palace?" Li Mu shook his head and said, "How can there be such a good thing? Between your miss and Sister Zhou you can only choose one." Wan hesitated for a long time, but she still could not make a decision. She said, I still want both." Li Mu knocked her on the head and said unhappily, "So greedy at such a young age. Where did you learn this from?" In Chang'e Palace, Zhou sighed softly and said, "This little girl, why can't she be fed properly?" Mount Baiyin. Fulu School had very strict requirements for its core disciples. Li Qing and Lu Hanyan were being nurtured as heads of department, so they also cultivated very diligently. When Li Mu brought Wan and Xiao Bai to Mount Baiyin, Li Qing was still in seclusion. Lu Hanyan just happened to come out of seclusion, but 3 days later she had to enter seclusion again. Wan tightly hugged Lu Hanyan's arm and said, "Miss, I missed you so much." Lu Hanyan pinched her face and said, "Not bad. It hasn't been long since we last met, but your cultivation has improved so much." Wan hugged her arm and asked, Miss, when will you return to the divine capital?" Lu Hanyan sensed that she still had something to say, so she asked, "It'll be a long time." "What's wrong?" Wan said, "When Miss returns to Fairy's capital, I'll bring you to the imperial kitchen to eat. There's countless delicious food there and it's different every day. When the time comes, Miss can also stay in the palace." Sister Zhou will definitely agree. Lu Hanyan first glanced at Li Mu, then smiled at Wan and asked, "Who taught you to say these words?" Li Mu spent the entire night to successfully prove to Lu Hanyan that he didn't teach Wan those words. Lu Hanyan had already occupied the Empress's place once. It would be unreasonable to do it again. Lu Hanyan was only a little annoyed that Wan kept calling her Sister Zhou. It was as if someone else was wearing her cotton jacket. 3 days later, Lu Hanyan went into seclusion again. Wan and Xiao Bai stayed at Baiyun Peak. Lu Hanyan and Li Qing often went into seclusion these days, but they didn't stay for long. The shortest was 3 to 5 days and the longest was 10 days to half a month. Normally it wouldn't exceed a month. Taking advantage of Lu Hanyan's seclusion, Li Mu left Baiyun Peak and came to Jiujiang County alone. Jiujiang County was one of the counties in the north of the Great Zhou. It was adjacent to the Yao Kingdom and most of its land was covered by forests. Compared to the other counties in the Great Zhou, Jiujiang County was more chaotic. There were often demons causing trouble, and it was also a county that the Consecrations Department paid more attention to. Because it was close to the Yao Kingdom, the demons causing trouble in Jiujiang County were usually stronger. The local government of Jiujiang County couldn't handle them, so they would seek help from the Consecrations Department. Before Li Mu left the Divine Capital, the Consecrations Department received a request for help from Jiujiang County. It said that there was a fox demon causing trouble in the county. The fox demon was at least 5-tailed and the county government couldn't suppress it. To be safe, the Consecrations Department would send at least 3 Creation Realm experts to deal with a 5-tailed fox demon. Li Mu happened to be sending Wan back to Baiyun Peak, so he came to take a look. Firstly, it was to quell the chaos in Jiujiang County. Secondly, it was a 5-tailed fox demon. Perhaps it knew the cultivation method for a fox demon after reaching the 5-tailed stage. The earlier Li Mu obtained it, the earlier Xiao Bai could cultivate it. Ever since she became a 5-tailed fox demon, her cultivation hadn't increased for a long time. Jiujiang County had many mountains and even the county city was a city in the mountains. At the most conspicuous spot at the city gate of Jiujiang County City, there was a notice posted. The notice said that a fox demon had been causing trouble in Jiujiang County recently and had injured many cultivators. The government announced that if a cultivator could capture or kill the fox demon alive, they would be rewarded handsomely by the imperial court. The fox demon had caused quite a commotion in Jiujiang County recently. Even the commoners knew about it. Within the county city, there were discussions about the demon everywhere. I heard that the fox demon has already cultivated 5 tails. It's very powerful. Many cultivators have had their dermic powers sucked away by it. It's not just sucked away their dermic powers. I heard that even their hearts, livers, spleens, lungs and kidneys have been dug out and eaten. I'd better not go out for now. When will the government eliminate this fox demon and restore peace to Jiujiang County? As Li Mu walked on the streets, he heard many rumors about the fox demon. It was possible that the fox demon had sucked away the dermic powers of cultivators. However, the rumors of it eating people's hearts and livers were purely based on reading too many supernatural novels. For a demon to be able to cultivate into a human form, its habits were similar to that of a human's. A normal person would not do such a thing. Similarly, a normal demon would not do such a thing. However, sucking away the dermic powers of others to cultivate was forbidden by the imperial court. Regardless of whether one was a human or a demon, they all had the freedom to cultivate in the Great Zhou. However, the precondition was that they did not harm others. The imperial court had always been strict about taking shortcuts by harming others. Li Mu found a restaurant and ordered a pot of tea and a few dishes. He planned to go to the Jiujiang County Yamen to inquire about the fox demon's whereabouts after he finished eating. He would capture it and help Xiao Bai find out about the cultivation method. It was lunchtime and there were many customers in the restaurant. Li Mu's gaze casually swept across the crowd. His gaze lingered on a table in the corner for a few seconds. There were 5 people at that table. They were all cultivators. 2 of them were in the creation realm while the other 3 were in the transcendent realm. This kind of strength was naturally not worth mentioning in the 6 sects or the Department of Offerings. However, in a small county city they could be considered a powerful force. It should be known that in the Jiujiang County Yamen, there were only 2 in the creation realm and 1 in the transcendent realm. Their lips moved slightly but no sound came out. It was as if they were communicating through dermic powers. Li Mu had no interest in eavesdropping, but these people had a strong murderous aura. When they communicated through dermic powers, the smiles on their faces were too vulgar. It was obvious that they were not plotting anything good. It was very easy to attract Li Mu's attention. In order to make sure that they were not planning something that would harm the people, Li Mu closed his eyes and moved his ears slightly. It was a type of demonic technique that originated from the Bat clan's innate divine power. It could easily eavesdrop on their dermic powers. Those people from the Yamen are really stupid. They believed us so easily. It's a pity that they are too useless. They can't even deal with a five-tailed fox demon. In the end, they had to ask others for help and almost ruined our plans. It would be such a pity if the target that we've been eyeing for so long was obtained by others. That fox demon is not easy to deal with. If those people hadn't injured her, we wouldn't have had a chance until now. Hurry up and eat. Once we're done, we'll act immediately. That fox demon should still be recuperating. We can't delay any longer. If the Great Zhou Court sends a true expert, our efforts over the past few months will have been in vain. A five-tailed fox demon will definitely sell for a high price. Big brother, after we capture her, can you let me have some fun first? I haven't had a taste of a five-tailed fox demon yet. T. A fox demon that hasn't been touched by anyone is only valuable. Take care of that damn thing of yours. Li Mu opened his eyes, picked up his teacup and took a light sip. It was such a coincidence that he would meet the instigators of the fox demon incident at a random restaurant. The cause of the incident was that these 5 people had their eyes on the fox demon. However, they were no match for the fox demon, so they came up with this plan of borrowing the power of the local government to weaken the fox demon first. Then they would be able to take advantage of the situation behind the scenes. It was a wishful thinking. The Great Zhou was a human government. Generally speaking, the people of the Great Zhou referred to the humans who lived in the Great Zhou. For the imperial court, if demons harmed people, the government had to kill them. However, killing demons by humans was not something the government should be concerned with. These 5 heretical cultivation practitioners had used this reason to make use of the Zhejiang County government. Their goal had been that fox demon from the very beginning. There were evil demons who ate the essence, blood and souls of humans. There were also evil humans who killed demons for their cores. There was also a group of cultivators who did not walk the righteous path. Because they were afraid of the imperial court, they did not dare to attack the common people. Therefore they targeted demons. Killing people was against the law, but killing demons did not count. Even if the Great Zhou court found out, they would not do anything to them. In Li Mu's eyes, these people were no different from those evil demons. When he was halfway through his meal, the 5 people had already left their table and strode out of the restaurant. Li Mu left a silver ingot and walked out slowly. Not long after, outside the Zhejiang County, a thin man closed his eyes and sensed. He pointed in a direction and said, "The blood curse's reaction is over there. Let's go." As he finished speaking, several figures shot up into the sky and flew forward. At a certain moment, the thin man suddenly stopped and looked back. The other 4 people also stopped and asked, "Big brother, what's wrong?" The middle-aged man looked back and said, "I keep feeling that someone is following us." The other 4 people immediately became alert. They looked around but found nothing. One of them was puzzled and said, "There's nothing." "Big brother, are you mistaken?" Another person said, "Even if someone is following us, it's impossible for there not to be any fluctuations of mana. Big brother, are you being too sensitive?" The thin man looked around and said, "Maybe I'm thinking too much. Let's go." The 5 people continued forward and quickly disappeared. But after the time it took to drink a cup of tea, they appeared out of thin air. The man who disappeared looked around again and sighed in relief. He said, "Looks like there really isn't anything." One of them smiled and said, "I already said Big brother is being too sensitive. Let's go quickly. If that fox demon escapes, it will be difficult to find." The 5 people flew away again. On the ground, an invisible figure followed behind them at a leisurely pace. The invisibility spells of Taoism were of little value and could only be used on mortals. In front of cultivators of the same level, they would definitely be exposed. Although invisibility spells could prevent any fluctuations of mana, he could only rely on the strength of his legs. If he used spells to fly or ride on clouds, he would be easily discovered. Fortunately, Li Mu cultivated Taoism. His body was far stronger than normal cultivators. Even if he only relied on the strength of his legs, he would not lose sight of him for a while. After only 15 minutes, he sensed a strong fluctuation of mana in front of him. The few heretical cultivation cultivators should have been fighting with the fox demon and could not take care of this place. Li Mu put on his clothes and hid behind a tree to observe the situation in front of him. 5 heretical cultivation cultivators were besieging a woman. The woman's cultivation seemed to be at the 5th level, but she seemed to be injured. Her breath was extremely unstable. Under the siege of the 5 heretical cultivation cultivators, she could not fight back at all. After taking a few blows, her breath became even more chaotic. Li Mu thought to himself, if he saved the fox demon at this time, she would be indebted to him for saving her life. Even if she was not of the heavenly fox clan as her savior, he did not need her to repay him with her body. As long as she told him the cultivation method of the heavenly fox clan, it should not be too much, right? Thinking of this, Li Mu wanted to take action. Half of his body was already out of the tree, but he suddenly shrank back. In the distant sky, more than 10 figures were rushing over. These figures all exuded a strong aura. Li Mu hid behind the tree and took a peek. He could not help but be shocked. Among the 10 people, the woman in the lead was Phantom Princess. Chapter 436. Huanji led the group over. Seeing the fox demon covered in wounds and weak aura, she immediately realized something. She glanced at the 5 heretical cultivation cultivators and gritted her teeth. You deserve to die. The Fox clan elites beside her were also enraged. They took out their Dharma treasures and weapons and attacked the 5 evil cultivators. Huanji flew to the fox demon and asked, "Are you okay?" Although the fox demon didn't know the woman in front of her, she felt a very familiar aura from her. She knew that the woman was a fox like her. Not only the woman but the others also had a demonic aura. She relaxed and said, "I'm fine. Thank you, sister." Huanji held her hand and transferred her spiritual energy into her body. She asked, "Why were you chased by these people?" Speaking of this, the fox demon's face was filled with anger. She gritted her teeth and said, "These villains captured many of my people and sold them to those despicable humans. They also targeted me. They framed me for harming people and asked the government to gather human cultivators to kill me so that they could reap the benefits. If you didn't save me, I would have been in their hands." Huanji's face was filled with hatred. She said angrily, "These despicable humans." On the other side, the 5 heretical cultivation cultivators were complaining in their hearts. They thought that victory was in their hands and they would soon capture the fox demon that they had been eyeing for months. Fox girls were rare in the black market, not to mention a 5-tailed one. If they were lucky enough to meet a rich buyer, they could exchange it for a lot of spiritual jades. But who would have thought that just as they were about to succeed, so many people would suddenly appear out of nowhere? These dozen or so people were all at least at the 4th realm. At least 4 of them were at the 5th realm. The 3 divinity realm evil cultivators were quickly captured. The other 2 5th realm cultivators could only put up a resistance for a short while before their dermic powers were sealed and they were tied up tightly. Huanji looked coldly at them and said, "Take them back and deal with them." Li Mu hid behind a tree and hid his aura. He didn't choose to help these people. This was their own sin, so they had to bear the consequences. At this moment he was thinking about something else. If he went out now, what were his chances of taking down Huanji? Huanji's subordinates were negligible, but she herself was not easy to deal with. As the 2nd generation of the demon race, she had countless magic treasures. Li Mu had already experienced it once. Although Li Mu was not afraid of her, this was Zhejiang County, which was adjacent to the demon nation. If Huanji were to summon the Lord of Illusions, he would be in big trouble. After thinking about it for a long time, Li Mu still did not take the risk. Not far away, Huanji said to the fox demon, "Sister, your injuries are not light. Why don't you come to my place to recover? After you recover, you can choose whether to stay or leave." The fox demon didn't think for long before she nodded and said, "Then I'll have to trouble you, sister." Her injuries were indeed not light. Although they were not fatal, she could not use much of her strength. At this moment, a transcendent realm cultivator could capture her. The woman in front of her, whom she had never met before, was of the same clan as her. The Fox clan would not harm their own. Huanji supported her and said, "Let's go." Just as she was about to leave, she suddenly frowned. She reached out and a palm-sized compass appeared. The needle on the compass spun quickly and finally pointed in a certain direction. Huanji looked in that direction and her face sank. She said sternly, "Who is there? Come out." As soon as she finished speaking, several of her subordinates behind her flew towards a huge tree. Behind the tree, a figure squatted down and said in fear, Don't kill me, don't kill me. I'm just passing by. A man looked at the figure and asked, Who are you? The figure looked up and revealed a handsome face. His expression was one of fear as he said with a trembling voice, I'm not a human, I'm a demon. At this moment, they realized that his body was emitting a faint demon aura. It was not strong and seemed like he had just transformed. The man frowned and asked, Why are you sneaking around here? The young man pointed at the 5 heretical cultivation cultivators and said, I was passing by and saw them fighting. I was afraid that they would kill me so I hid here. The man sized up Li Mu and walked to Huanji. He said, Lord Huanji, it's a small demon. Huanji nodded and said, Let's go. Just as the man was about to leave, he turned around and looked at the little demon. He thought for a moment and said, Sir, this little demon is very handsome. Although he is a bit timid, he might be of great use in the future if we train him. The others sized up the small demon again. They realized that although this demon was not strong, he was very handsome. Soft skin and tender flesh. Not bad. This is rare even in Meizong. Not only is he rare, even the young Ming would have to avoid him. The man looked at Huanji and said, Lord Huanji, Meizong is lacking in manpower. With this small demon's appearance, he might be able to carry Meizong in the future. Huanji looked at the small demon and thought for a moment before saying, Go ask him if he's willing to join Meizong. The man walked to the small demon and asked, Small demon, what's your name? The small demon lowered his head and shivered. He said, My surname is Wu, you can call me Yanzu. As he spoke, his human eyes gradually turned into a pair of green vertical pupils. The change in the small demon's eyes proved his identity. The man pointed at Huanji and said to the small demon, Little snake, that's Lord Huanji of Meizong. Are you willing to join Meizong and follow Lord Huanji? The small demon hesitated for a moment and asked softly, Is there any benefit in joining Meizong? The man smiled and said, There are many benefits. In the Meizong sect, you can obtain spiritual jades for cultivation and also receive guidance from experts. Lord Illusion Princess's father, Lord Illusion Heaven Lord, is a 7th level Xian demon. If you can receive his guidance, maybe you will have the chance to become a great demon in the future. When the small demon heard this, his eyes lit up. He immediately nodded and said, Then I'm willing. The man patted him on the shoulder and said, Then let's go. After keeping the small demon, the group flew into the air again. The handsome demon did not have enough spiritual power and was carried by the others. They flew all the way to the demon country in the depths of the 100,000 mountains. The man beside the small demon looked at him and asked, Little snake, what other relatives do you have in your family? Aren't you going to tell them? After a while, the small demon was already familiar with them. He said, My parents were killed by human cultivators long ago. I've always been alone. I don't have any relatives. In the group, another person gritted his teeth and said, Damn humans. How many demons have died in their hands? They write about demons eating humans all day long. Why don't they write about humans killing demons? Demons killing humans is intolerable. Humans killing demons is enforcing justice on behalf of the heavens. The small demon said, Not all books are written like that. There's a book called Strange Stories from a Chinese studio. It's written quite well. There are evil people in it, but there are also demons who are affectionate and righteous. The man said, I know about this book. Lord Huanji likes to read it. She even asked us to find Pu Songling and pay him a visit. Unfortunately, we haven't found him. He shook his head and said, There aren't many people like Mr. Pu who are sensible. Most of the humans keep saying that the monsters are evil, but what have they done? Killing the monsters, taking their souls, stealing our monster cores, capturing the female monsters of the fox race and the snake race, sealing their cultivation base and providing them with entertainment. It's not just female demons. Many handsome male demons were also captured by them to satisfy the different desires of humans. Little snake, you're just lucky. With your looks, if those humans saw you, they would definitely capture you and make you do that kind of thing with them. The small demon was stunned. Then he said embarrassedly, There's such a good thing? The man patted his shoulder and said, You're thinking too much. If you're lucky, they'll make you accompany those old women. If you sleep with them for one night, you'll have nightmares for 10 days. If you're unlucky, they'll make you accompany men. Pa, do you still think that's a good thing? The small demon was so scared that his face turned pale. He said, Too scary, too scary. The man beside him smiled and said, Don't worry. Now that you're with Lord Huanji, no one can bully you. Cultivate well in the future. Only when you're strong can you control your fate as a demon. The small demon's face became serious. He said, I know. Thank you, big brother. Chapter 437. The group flew across the 100,000 mountains. Half a day later they landed in a city in the mountains. The handsome little demon asked the handsome man next to him, Brother Hujiu, where are we? The handsome man smiled and said, This is the Thousand Fox country. It's also where the Meizong sect is located. After entering the city, everyone dispersed. Hujiu said to Li Mu, Come with me. Although the Thousand Fox country was a demon country, the demon capital was no different from a human city. There were streets, shops, all kinds of buildings, tea houses, taverns, and even brothels in the city. If it weren't for the demon qi emitting from the people passing by, it would be impossible to tell that this was a demon country. Although the demon race and the human race were often at odds with each other, they also yearned for the human race's appearance and the splendid culture they created. The royal family of the Thousand Fox country were fox demons, but there weren't many fox demons on the streets. Most of them were demons of other races that were attached to the fox race. The other demon countries were probably in a similar situation. In addition to demons, there were also humans on the streets, but there were very few of them. They should all be from the Meizong sect. Hujiu led the little demon through several streets and walked into a very large mansion. The two of them came to a side courtyard near the front of the mansion. Hujiu brought him to a room and said, This is Lord Huanji's mansion. You can stay here for now. When you have enough contributions, you can use your contributions to move out and live in a separate mansion. But you rest first. I'll come and see you tomorrow morning. Hujiu walked out of the room and the door closed automatically. The handsome little demon sat on the bed and let out a long sigh of relief. When he was discovered by Phantom Princess during the day, Li Mu wanted to escape directly into the sky teapot space. But on second thought, this was a rare opportunity. If he missed it, Xiao Bai's cultivation would be delayed for a long time. As the saying goes, you can't catch a fox without entering the fox's den. For Xiao Bai's cultivation and to find out the details of the Meizong sect, Li Mu finally chose to take the risk. Only by getting close to Huanji would he have the chance to obtain the subsequent cultivation methods of the Fox clan. Furthermore, he wanted to find out how many spies Meizong had planted in the imperial court. The Meizong sect liked handsome and beautiful men and women. As an enemy, the Phantom Princess had extended an olive branch to Li Mu from the start. It could be seen that the Meizong sect was lacking in people. Of course, Li Mu could not use his original appearance. For safety's sake, he pretended to be an extremely handsome snake demon. For Li Mu, who possessed the demon clan's heavenly book, pretending to be a demon was a simple matter. He could even use the demon race's divine ability to change his form and transform into a snake. What happened after that went according to his expectations. As long as they didn't get too close to Lord of Heaven Illusion, they wouldn't be discovered. On the way there, Li Mu had already learned from Hujiu that Lord of Heaven Illusion had just gone into seclusion. Moreover, the seclusion this time was extremely long. Before the seclusion, he had completely handed over Meizong to Huanji. In other words, Thousand Fox Nation and Meizong sect would not have a seventh realm powerhouse guarding them for a very long time. In other words, Li Mu could do it boldly. Right now, he was just a newcomer and couldn't gain Huanji's trust. He could only take one step at a time and wait for the right time. He first secretly sent a message to Lu Hanyan and the Empress, informing them of his plan and telling them not to worry. Then he turned off the lights and went to sleep. From now on, he was an ordinary little demon in Huanji's residence. The next day, Li Mu had just woken up when a familiar voice came from outside the door. "Little snake, are you awake?" It wasn't Li Mu's first time seeing Hujiu. When Huanji brought people into the White Emperor cave abode last time, Hujiu was by her side. Perhaps Hujiu felt that this name was familiar, so she didn't call him by the fake name he gave himself. Li Mu got out of bed, opened the door and asked with a smile, "Big brother Hujiu, what's the matter so early in the morning?" Hujiu walked into the room and put a pile of things on the table. She introduced them one by one. "This is your waist token, which can prove your identity as Meizong sect. These spiritual jades are the cultivation resources you can receive every month. Originally, with your level, you only received 10 pieces, but Lord Huanji said that you just joined Meizong sect, so she gave you an extra 10 pieces this month. I see that you don't have any weapons, so I'll give you this sword. Although it's not a powerful Dharma treasure, it should be enough. Other things aside, Meizong sect treated newcomers very well. Not only did they provide him with food and accommodation, but he also got paid before he made any contributions to Meizong sect. Not to mention other things, just the sword in Li Mu's hand at this moment was of a higher grade than Bai Yi. Hu Jiu continued, "Your strength is too low, so I don't have any important tasks for you for the time being. You should cultivate slowly and advance to the upper realm as soon as possible. Now you have to come with me to see Lord Huanji." Walking out of the courtyard, Li Mu asked, "Big brother Hu Jiu, why is Lord Huanji looking for me?" Hu Jiu smiled and said, "Don't worry, although Lord Huanji has a noble status, she usually treats her subordinates very well. Following Lord Huanji there are countless benefits. She should be looking for you today because of the sect entrance ceremony." "What sect entrance ceremony?" "You'll know in a while." Hu Jiu led Li Mu all the way and soon entered a spacious courtyard. The courtyard was very large. There were artificial mountains, ponds, grass gardens and everything else. Huanji stood with her back to the door. Hu Jiu led Li Mu in and bowed, "Lord Huanji, I've brought him here." Li Mu also bowed and said, "Greetings, Lord Huanji." Huanji turned around, looked at Li Mu and said lightly, "Those who enter my Meizong sect must abide by the rules of Meizong sect and keep the secret of Meizong sect. Those who betray Meizong sect, even if you escape to the ends of the earth, I will personally kill you. You still have the chance to go back on your words." Li Mu pointed to the sky and said, "I, Daniel Wu, swear to the heavens that if I betray Meizong sect, let me become a dog." For the Snake clan, there was nothing more ruthless than this oath. Li Mu learned this from the two sisters Yin Xin and Ting Xin. Hu Jiu smiled and said, "Your Snake clan still doesn't like the Dog clan." Li Mu coldly snorted and said, "From the moment they pledged allegiance to humans, they were no longer Monster Clan but our enemies." Huanji crossed her arms and said, "Well, as long as you do one more thing, you can become an official disciple of Meizong sect." Li Mu cupped his fists and said, "Please instruct me, Lord Huanji." Huanji pointed to a stone statue next to the rockery and said, "Slash it with your sword." Although he didn't know what strange rule this was, Li Mu still walked to the stone statue next to the rockery. When he raised his sword he was stunned for a moment, but it was only for a moment. Then the sword in his hand fiercely slashed down. Clang! Li Mu's sword slashed the stone statue, leaving a shallow sword mark. He walked back and asked curiously, "Why do you want to slash this stone statue?" Huanji looked at him indifferently and said, "This is not something you should ask." On the way back, Hu Jiu explained to Li Mu, "That person is Lord Huanji's enemy. If you meet him in the future you have to avoid him." Li Mu was confused and asked, "Why? If I meet him, shouldn't I kill him to avenge Lord Huanji?" Hu Jiu glanced at him and said, "Then you have to have the ability to do so. This person's Dharma power is very strong. Countless cultivators of the Devil's Doctrine have died at his hands, including the first elder of the Origin Soul sect, Nether Saint. If you could kill him you wouldn't be here." Li Mu smiled embarrassedly and asked, "What enmity does this person have with Lord Huanji? Why does Lord Huanji hate him so much?" Hu Jiu glanced at him and said, "Don't ask about Lord Huanji." Li Mu immediately became serious and said, "I know." Hu Jiu added, "However, if this person happens to fall into your hands in the future, don't kill him. Bring him back and hand him over to Lord Huanji. You will receive countless benefits and even have the chance to comprehend the Heavenly Book. Although that Heavenly Book belongs to the Fox clan, other clans can also benefit from it." Li Mu shook his head and said, "Forget it. Even such a strong person is not his match. Wouldn't I be courting death if I go?" Hu Jiu slapped his head and said angrily, "You are a snake demon. How can you be more cowardly than a rat demon? You are a disgrace to the Snake clan." Li Mu laughed and said, "There is nothing wrong with being careful. Only by being careful can we live longer." Hu Jiu nodded and said, "That's right. That Li Mu is not only strong but also very handsome. Even a strong person like the Empress of the Great Zhou is infatuated with him. It is said that he often goes in and out of the palace and sleeps in the Empress' bedroom." Li Mu said in surprise, "You know this too?" Hu Jiu smiled and said, "The spies of the Meizong sect are all over the world. You will know in the future." Li Mu's eyes shone with admiration and said, "The Meizong sect is too powerful." Hu Jiu breathed a sigh of relief and said, "That Li Mu is the powerful one. He did what Cui Ming couldn't do in 20 years in 2 years. It is said that in the imperial court he is in charge of the imperial court alone. If we pull Li Mu into the Meizong sect, every move of the Zhou kingdom will be under our control. We can even control the great Zhou through this person. Li Mu laughed dryly and said, "Good plan." Hu Jiu continued, "However, that Li Mu is a very upright person. I'm afraid it won't be easy to win him over. However, we can take advantage of his lecherous characteristics and think of a way to let the women of the Meizong sect seduce him." Li Mu was stunned for a moment and said, "Lecherous?" Hu Jiu nodded and said, "According to our spies in Luoyang, every time Li Mu goes out, there must be beauties by his side. His wife is an outstanding beauty, and the 2 concubines by his side are also first-class beauties. One of them is the most beautiful woman in our fox tribe. Not to mention there is also the Empress of the Great Zhou. Rumor has it that this person will have 10 women every night and won't get up until late in the morning." Li Mu said angrily, "Slander, this is pure slander." Hu Jiu looked at him strangely and asked, "Why are you so agitated?" Li Mu said angrily, "Which spy provided this false information? If Li Mu really followed the Empress of the Great Zhou, how could the Empress allow him to have an affair with other women? This information is obviously false. That spy is too irresponsible. If he acted rashly based on this false information, wouldn't he be letting our sisters of the Meizong sect walk into a trap?" After thinking deeply, Hu Jiu said, "What you said makes sense. That Li Mu seducing the Empress of the Great Zhou may be false, but it must be true that he is easily fascinated by women. Is it possible to win him over through the woman beside him?" Chapter 438. Li Mu returned to his room unhappily. He didn't expect his reputation to be ruined by the spies of the Meizong sect. What surprised him even more was that the spies of the Meizong sect could find out so many secrets. Xiao Bai didn't have any demonic aura on her body. How did they know that she was a fox? The palace gates were closed at night. Li Mu, Wanwan and Xiao Bai lived in the palace. Only a few palace maids near Chang'e Palace knew that there were people from the Meizong sect among them. Li Mu didn't rush to inform the Empress. He just came to Thousand Fox City last night. Perhaps the powerhouses of the Meizong sect didn't have time to notice him, but it might not be the case today. Although he joined the Meizong sect because they invited him, the Meizong sect was too trusting of him. They seemed to trust him, but they might have secretly begun to monitor his every move. The jade talisman that the Empress gave him and the fulu that Li Mu drew to shield himself from the mysteries of heaven had been put away by him long ago. These things could be used to shield the mysteries of heaven to prevent others from prying. Using them here meant that he didn't want to expose himself fast enough. Even powerhouses above the 6th realm couldn't spy on a small snake demon in human form. Wasn't that just giving away 300 taels of silver? After returning to his room, Li Mu did not do anything superfluous. He sat cross-legged on his bed, took out a piece of spirit jade, held it in his hand and began to draw qi to cultivate. He sat there until night fell. Just after midnight, the spiritual jade in Li Mu's hand turned into powder. With the strength of a transformed demon, it would take about this long to absorb a spiritual jade. After that, he got out of bed and stretched for a while. He drank a glass of water and then went to bed again. On the highest mountain in Thousand Fox City, in a cave on the mountain, a man who looked similar to Huan Ji waved his hand and dispersed the dark light technique. He said, "This demon should be fine." Huan Ji nodded and said, "Then I'll use it without worry." The man said, "His appearance can be considered outstanding, but it's a pity that he's a demon. It would be great if he was a human. If we need him in the future, we'll have to wash his demon body." How troublesome. They're my people. Don't tell them what to do. Phantom Princess frowned and said, "What about those heretical cultivation cultivators?" A trace of killing intent appeared in the man's eyes as he said, "Kill them. How many of our compatriots have died at their hands because they have been humiliated? One day I will kill all of these damned humans." The next morning, Li Mu learned from Hu Jiu that the 5 human heretical cultivation practitioners had been publicly executed in the Thousand Fox Nation. Human beings hated heretical cultivation, and demons hated heretical cultivation even more than human beings did. Due to the prestige of the Great Zhou court, heretical cultivation was still somewhat afraid of taking the lives of the people of Great Zhou. They were afraid of alarming the Department of Worship, so they didn't dare to wantonly cause harm. But they didn't have to worry about demons. The great Zhou court wouldn't protect the demons, and the demon nation was a mass of scattered sand. There was nothing to be afraid of. Therefore, a large number of heretical cultivation practitioners hunted and killed demons everywhere. They extracted the souls of low-level demons, seized the inner cores of mid-level demons, and transformed into good-looking demons. Regardless of gender, they were sold to the black market to provide for certain customers with special requirements to visit prostitutes. This had even formed a huge black industry chain. Countless demons suffered from it and hated this kind of heretical cultivation. Especially the Fox clan, because after transforming, the males were handsome and the females were beautiful. They were the focus of heretical cultivation. Although the major righteous sects restrained their disciples from doing such inhumane things, they were the same as the court and wouldn't stand up for the demons. When they returned home, Hu looked seriously at Li Mu and said, "Little snake, you have to remember to stay away from humans. Don't be deceived by their flowery words. Some people like a tender and handsome little demon like you the most." Li Mu shivered and said, "I will be careful. Thank you, brother Hu." Hu patted his shoulder and said, "We're all on the same side. Don't be so polite. By the way, you just entered the Meizong sect and are still too weak to go out with us to carry out missions. Tonight, you will be on guard duty in front of Miss Illusion Princess's courtyard. When dawn comes, someone will come to replace you." Li Mu nodded and said, "I know." It was late at night and the moonlight was bright. Li Mu stood at the door of Illusion Princess's courtyard with his sword in his hands. He was the second-generation disciple of the Fulu school, the future headmaster, the controller of the Department of Consecration in the Great Show, the deputy commander of the internal guards and the close minister of the Empress. Yet he was guarding the door of a fox demon. Li Mu didn't plan to be like the spies of the Meizong sect and completely forget their identities. He had hidden for 20 years and climbed up step by step without leaving any traces. He felt that 2 months was too long. But now he could only guard the door here. If this went on, when could he reach the top of the Meizong sect, comprehend the heavenly book of the Fox clan and steal the secrets of the Meizong sect? Now he was still a little demon at the bottom of the Meizong sect. Illusion Princess wouldn't even look at him. He had to do something to show his value and attract Illusion Princess's attention. Then he could take the opportunity to climb up. In the courtyard, Illusion Princess slashed the stone statue beside the rockery a few times and then walked back to her room. She sat cross-legged on the bed and stretched out her hand. An ancient book page floated above her palm. She calmed her mind and focused. Soon her consciousness was immersed in it. Outside the courtyard, Li Mu, who was racking his brains to think of a way to climb up, suddenly raised his eyebrows. He sensed an extremely familiar aura from the courtyard behind him. This was the aura of the Heavenly Book. The Heavenly Book of the Lord of Illusions was in the hands of Illusion Princess. At this moment, Li Mu suddenly had a strong impulse to rush in and subdue Illusion Princess, snatch the Heavenly Book and run. But soon he dispelled this idea. Illusion Princess wasn't easy to deal with. He couldn't subdue Illusion Princess in a short time. If thousands of Fox clan experts arrived, it would be difficult for him to leave. Even if he had the Demon Emperor's cave, if the space was sealed, he would be trapped here and die. After thinking for a long time, Li Mu took a breath and resisted the temptation. In the room, Illusion Princess comprehended the Heavenly Book for the whole night. Outside the courtyard, Li Mu also endured for the whole night. In the past few hours he had countless thoughts of seizing the Heavenly Book, but he suppressed it countless times. When the sky was bright, Hu came over with another little demon and said, "Little snake, you can go back and rest now." Li Mu was about to go back to his room, but when he saw Hu and the other two preparing to go out, he asked, "Brother Hu, what are you going to do?" Hu said, "Before those heretical cultivation cultivators died, the great elder searched their souls and learned of their nest. Several of our clansmen were captured there. We are going to save them." There was no future in guarding the door. Li Mu was worried that he wouldn't have a chance to show off, so he immediately said, "Brother Hu, I'll go too." A person behind Hu glanced at Li Mu and said, "Your strength is so low. What can you do? Not only can you not help, but you will also cause trouble." Li Mu said, "My parents died in the hands of these heretical cultivation cultivators. I hate heretical cultivation the most. If I follow you, maybe I can meet the murderer who killed my parents. My biggest dream is to avenge my parents with my own hands one day." After hearing Li Mu's justifiable reason, they didn't say anything else. Hu Jiu thought for a moment and nodded. The task this time is not dangerous. You can come if you want. It won't do you any harm to go through more hardships. Walking on the edge of life and death is good for improving your cultivation. Li Mu made a fist salute and said, "Thank you, brother Hu Jiu. I will try my best." Half a month's time quietly passed. It only took half a month for the little snake demon who had joined Meizong sect not long ago to become familiar with him and then to trust him. Although he didn't make much contribution to Meizong sect, compared with those guys who wanted to escape first when they encountered a task, this timid snake demon took the initiative to follow them every time. He completed many tasks with them and saved many of his compatriots of the demon clan who had fallen into the hands of heretical cultivation. Although he wasn't strong, his spiritual sense was naturally sharp. He reminded them many times in advance and saved them a lot of trouble. He also won the trust of the demons because of this. In the process of carrying out tasks, they would take the initiative to take care of him. They had already regarded him as one of their own. In Phantom Princess Mansion, Li Mu opened the door and saw Hu Jiu standing outside. He asked, "Brother Hu Jiu, is there another task?" Hu Jiu shook her head and said, "You told me not long ago to be careful. During this period of time, you took risks and carried out tasks more diligently than anyone else." Li Mu's face was solemn as he said, "I'm just a little demon. I don't know when I'll be captured by humans and forced to sleep with old women. It's Lord Huanji who gave me everything I have now. I want to repay Lord Huanji." Hu Jiu looked satisfied and said, "Very good. Lord Phantom Princess didn't misjudge you." He took out a jade bottle and handed it to Li Mu. He said, "Lord Phantom Princess gave this to you." Li Mu took the jade bottle and asked, "What is this?" Hu Jiu said, "This is the demon core of a snake demon who just stepped into the 5th realm. We took it back from a human heretical cultivation. Lord Phantom Princess has seen your recent performance. This is her reward for you. After refining this demon core, you should be able to advance to the 4th realm." Li Mu's face revealed an excited expression as he hurriedly said, "Many thanks, Lord Huanji." Hu Jiu patted his shoulder and said, "Work hard. If you can successfully advance, I will propose to Lord Phantom Princess to let you become her personal guard." Li Mu held the jade bottle and said firmly, "Don't worry, brother Hu Jiu. I will work hard." Looking at Hu Jiu's back, Li Mu closed the door and let out a sigh of relief. During this period of time with his positive performance, he finally attracted some of Phantom Princess's attention. But it was far from enough to get close to the heavenly book. His next goal was to become her personal guard and gain her complete trust. 3 days later. Beside the fake mountain, Phantom Princess was practicing with the stone statue. She suddenly turned her head and looked in a certain direction. A 4th realm demon energy rushed into the sky. Behind her, Hu Jiu smiled and said, "Lord Phantom Princess, he broke through. Do you want to promote him to your personal guard?" Phantom Princess looked away and said, "Let's wait and see." Chapter 439. In the room, Li Mu retracted the demonic aura that he deliberately emitted. He kept the snake demon pill that Phantom Princess gave him. He planned to give it to his 2 nieces in the future. As long as he converted more of his own Dharma power, he could create the illusion that he had broken through. Not long after, Hu Jiu walked into the courtyard and said regretfully, "Although you can't become Lord Illusion Princess personal guard right now, I believe that Lord Illusion Princess will agree soon." Li Mu was slightly disappointed. What Hu Jiu meant was that he was not qualified to become Phantom Princess's guard now. Phantom Princess had 20 guards who were her true confidants. If he wanted to get close to her and get the chance to comprehend the heavenly book, he had to become her confidant first. There was no faster way to get close to her than to become her guard. He was already qualified to become her guard as he was at the 4th realm. However, Phantom Princess obviously did not agree. If he wanted to get close to her, Li Mu had to work harder. Hu Jiu seemed to see Li Mu's disappointment. She reached out and gave him a bear hug. She said, "Don't be discouraged. You've only been in Meizong for half a month. Work hard. There will be plenty of opportunities in the future." Li Mu said, "Thank you, brother Hu Jiu. I will." Although they were on different sides, after half a month of interaction, Li Mu, as a snake demon, had already built a deep friendship with the people around Phantom Princess. One had to admit that the atmosphere in Meizong was very good. It was even better than the imperial court. When Li Mu was in Fairy's capital, The people around him greeted him with smiles on the surface. However, they were scheming and backstabbing behind his back. They wanted to kill him. However, in Meizong, perhaps because everyone was good-looking, the atmosphere was very harmonious. They supported and helped each other. When facing enemies, they cooperated sincerely. They could even leave their backs to each other. Especially Hu Jiao. From the beginning, she took good care of Li Mu. She brought him quickly to familiarize himself with everything here. She was his guide in Meizong. They met by chance. Li Mu was surprised that Hu Jiao was so nice to him. After they hugged each other deeply, Hu Jiao comforted Li Mu with a few more words before she turned around and left. Li Mu was about to return to his room when he saw a small demon looking at him strangely from the door of another room. This demon was also a fox demon, but she was not from Meizong. Instead, she was a servant of Phantom Princess Manor. There were a total of 4 rooms in this small courtyard. Other than Li Mu, the other 3 demons were all servants of the manor. Li Mu glanced at the little demon and asked, "What are you looking at?" The little demon immediately shook his head and said, "No, nothing." The little demon wanted to return to his room immediately, but Li Mu said in a deep voice, "Come back." Little demon immediately stopped in his tracks. He was just a little demon in human form. His identity could not be compared to the experts of Meizong. Li Mu looked at him and asked, "What did you want to say?" The little demon no longer dared to feign ignorance. He lowered his head and whispered, "Everyone knows that Lord Nine doesn't like women." Li Mu was dumbfounded. What? At this moment, the mystery that had been in his heart for many days was solved. No wonder Hu Jiao repeatedly praised him for his good looks. No wonder Hu Jiao took care of him so much. He thought that Hu Jiao was just warm-hearted and helpful. Everyone knew that Hu Jiao didn't like women, but he didn't. After learning this news, he thought carefully. It seemed that Hu Jiao's words to him these days were full of hints. Li Mu stood there in a daze. He had never been so speechless in his life. After coming to his senses, he didn't dare to stay in the manor anymore. When he walked out of Phantom Princess Manor, he didn't expect to run into Hu Jiao. Hu Jiao asked, "Little snake, where are you going?" Li Mu had nowhere to hide. He said awkwardly, "I'm going to take a bath." Hu Jiao said regretfully, "It's a pity that we have to go out. Otherwise I would go with you." Li Mu asked, "Is there another mission?" Hu Jiao said, "This mission is very dangerous. You don't have to go. When I come back, I'll take you to take a bath together." Li Mu originally wanted to participate in more missions and make more contributions so that he could become Phantom Princess's guard as soon as possible. But when he thought of Hu Jiao and that he had more important things to do, he gave up the idea and said, "We'll talk about it when we have the chance." He waved to Hu Jiao and strode away. The Fox clan was probably the demon clan that knew how to enjoy life the most. Their IQ was not inferior to that of humans and they liked to live in human society. The construction of Thousand Fox City was not worse than that of any county in the Great Zhou, and the entertainment venues in the city were even better. At least, Li Mu had never seen such a magnificent bathhouse in Luoyang. Li Mu walked into the bathhouse. In the bathhouse, a beautiful fox demon saw Li Mu's clothes and the badge on his waist. She immediately put on a smile and said, "My lord, welcome to my shop." Li Mu put down a Fox Nation coin made of spiritual jade and said, "Prepare a single room for me." The beautiful fox demon said with a smile, "Do you want 2 girls to massage your shoulders and back?" Li Mu said indifferently, "There's no need for that. Just prepare a private bath." The service in the bathhouse was very good. Seeing that Li Mu didn't want to talk, the beautiful fox demon didn't say anything more. Soon she asked someone to prepare a single room with a bath for him. The room was steaming hot. The hot water was poured on the hot stones, creating a thick mist that soon spread throughout the room. Although it had been half a month since he came here, Li Mu still didn't let down his guard. He didn't know if the masters of Meizong sect were still spying on him. Even if they were, they wouldn't peek at him taking a bath. Besides, it was steaming here. The mystic light technique could spy on him, but it couldn't remove the fog. Even if someone was spying on him, they wouldn't see anything. Li Mu took off his clothes and walked into the bath. On the highest peak of Thousand Fox City, the handsome man looked at a blurry figure on the screen with admiration. He said, "I didn't expect this demon to have other strong points other than being handsome. Nurture him well. He'll be useful in the future." Huan Ji hurriedly turned around and used her mana to disrupt the mystic light technique. She said with disdain, When did you become like Hu Jiao? The handsome man looked at her and said, you're not young anymore. It's time to think about marriage. I think Bai Xian is good. Huanji waved her hand and said impatiently, don't mention him to me. So annoying. He's not even as good as me. How can he be my husband? The handsome man said helplessly, you're a rare genius of our fox tribe. Isn't it difficult for people of the same age to reach your level? Huanji snorted and said, this isn't an excuse for them to be weak. At this moment, a figure appeared in her mind. Before meeting Li Mu, Huanji thought she was the strongest among people of the same age except for the one in the Great Zhou divine capital. After meeting Li Mu, her self-confidence suffered a huge blow. These days she worked even harder to cultivate so that one day, she could avenge the humiliation she had suffered. Thinking of Li Mu, Huanji's heart was filled with anger. She said, I'll go back first. Write that statue. Get someone to carve another one for me and send it to my residence. Li Mu was lying comfortably in the bath alone, but he wasn't in the mood to enjoy it. The undercover life of the Meizong sect was much harder than he thought. It had been half a month and he still hadn't gained Huanji's trust. The only change was that Huanji didn't look at him directly. She would occasionally look at him directly. If this continued, he would have to stay here for 3 to 5 years to achieve his goal. This was something Li Mu couldn't accept. He had to think of another way. Li Mu didn't have much experience in winning a woman's trust. Usually the simplest way was, of course, seduction. However, there was no lack of handsome men and beautiful women in Thousand Fox Country. Even Hu Jia was handsome. Someone like Old Zhang would be discovered as soon as he sneaked into Thousand Fox Country. There was no chance for him to be an undercover in the Meizong sect. With such people around him, Huanji couldn't be seduced. Li Mu wouldn't sacrifice his body for the mission. If he wanted to quickly climb up the ranks, he had to rely on other methods. When the fog in the room rose to a limit, Li Mu quietly set up a soundproof array. He took out the spirit snail and whispered, Your Majesty. Soon the Empress's voice came from the spirit snail. Are you coming back? Li Mu could hear the anticipation in her voice, but he could only say helplessly, It might take a long time. I don't have much time, so I can only make it short. There are spies from the Meizong sect in the palace. It's very likely that they're palace maids near Chang'an Palace. Your Majesty can pay more attention, but it's best not to alert them. I understand. Be careful when you're there alone. Thank you for your concern, Your Majesty. It's not convenient to talk here. I'll hang up first. In Chang'an Palace, there had been no sound from the spirit snail for a long time. Zhou Yi was still holding it and didn't put it down for a long time. Lady Zhu, dressed in black, stood in the hall with a face full of shame. If only one of her spies was half as capable as Li Mu. Such an extremely dangerous task wouldn't be done by Her Majesty's favorite subject. Yao Country, Thousand Fox City. When Li Mu left the bathhouse and returned to his courtyard in Huanji Manor, he saw a figure standing in the courtyard. It seemed that she had been waiting for a long time. Li Mu quickly walked over and bowed. Greetings, Lady Huanji. Huanji looked at him and thought of the scene in the mystic light technique. Her expression was slightly unnatural, but she quickly calmed down and asked, Where did you go? Li Mu said honestly, I went to the bathhouse to take a bath. Lady Huanji, do you have any orders? Huanji said indifferently, It's not a big deal. I'm still lacking a poison for refining pills. Squeeze some of your poison for me. Chapter 440. Seeing that Li Mu didn't respond for a long time, Phantom Princess asked, What's wrong? You don't want to? Li Mu hurriedly said, Master Phantom Princess, you misunderstood me. I owe you a great favor. I can give you everything, but, Phantom Princess asked, But what? Li Mu explained, But not all snakes are poisonous. I happen to be the kind that is not poisonous. I can't squeeze out any venom. Why didn't you say so earlier? Phantom Princess glanced at him and left in disappointment. Li Mu breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, he reacted quickly. He was pretending. Even if Phantom Princess squeezed him dry, she couldn't squeeze out a drop of venom. The life of a spy was indeed full of danger. If he was careless, he would be exposed. In the past night, Li Mu didn't sleep well. He wasn't worried about being exposed, but he was thinking about how to tell Hu Jiao tactfully that he always liked women with big breasts and big butts. No matter how beautiful a man was, he wouldn't change his preference. It would be offensive and strange if he said it directly, but he was afraid that Hu Jiao wouldn't understand if he said it tactfully. Should he invite her to the brothel in the city? Some female monsters in the city didn't mind selling their bodies in order to get cultivation resources because they didn't have high cultivation talent. They were willing to do it, and it was legal in the Thousand Fox country. If he invited Hu Jiao to such a place, she should understand what he meant. No, he was still pretending to be an innocent Xiaobai snake. His purpose was to get close to Phantom Princess. Doing this kind of thing might reduce his impression in Phantom Princess's mind. He was completely ignoring the essentials. After thinking for a whole night, Li Mu decided to remind her secretly. After Li Mu got out of bed, he had just finished washing up when the dull sound of a bell suddenly came from outside. It was the signal for the Meizong sect to gather everyone. Li Mu quickly walked out of the yard and came to the front yard. More than 10 figures had gathered in the yard. All of them looked gloomy. Li Mu didn't know what had happened. When he was about to ask Hu Jiao, he glanced around the crowd and didn't see Hu Jiao. The demons that followed Hu Jiao on the mission yesterday had already returned, but Hu Jiao was nowhere to be seen. Li Mu looked at a demon who went on a mission with Hu Jiao yesterday and asked, "Where is brother Hu Jiao?" The fox monster lowered her head and said sadly, "We fell into the heretical cultivation's trap. Brother Hu Jiao stayed behind to cover our escape." Then, the fox demon did not continue, but someone else had already recounted the entire sequence of events. Meizong had obtained a lot of information about heretical cultivation by searching their souls after capturing the 5 heretical cultivation practitioners. With the intelligence, they had destroyed several nests of heretical cultivation and rescued dozens of their compatriots of the demon race in half a month. However, they were noticed by the heretical cultivation organizations too. This time, the heretical cultivation organization had deliberately released false information to lure them into the trap and then set up an ambush early on. If the demons had not smelled the danger in advance, perhaps none of them would have made it back this time. Even so, Hu Jiao had sacrificed her life to create a chance for them to escape. Phantom Princess walked out from the backyard and said in a low voice, "Follow me." A fox monster stood out and said to Phantom Princess, "Lord Phantom Princess, this matter needs to be considered at length. The 5 heretical cultivation practitioners are all in the 5th realm. They are siblings from the same mother. When they work together, they can fight against 6th realm cultivators. If we go, we will only be courting death. Lord Phantom Princess, please reconsider. We can't let Master Hu Jiao's sacrifice be in vain. We will take revenge sooner or later, but not now." Hearing everyone's advice, Phantom Princess took a deep breath and turned into a stream of light, flying to the highest mountain in Thousand Fox country. Not long after, at the peak, the handsome man shook his head at Phantom Princess and said, "Father is in seclusion. I have to guard this place and can't leave. Moreover, you know the rules of the demon country. No matter what grudges the people below have, no matter how big the trouble is, cultivators in the 6th realm and above can't interfere. Once we break this rule, others can break it too. When that happens, this place will become chaotic again. More 5th realm and even 6th realm cultivators will die." Phantom Princess did not force it. She gritted her teeth and said, "Then I will go myself." The handsome man shook his head and said, "You can't go. You are not their match." Phantom Princess said, "I want to take revenge for Hu Jiao." With that, she flew into the air and left. However, just as she flew into the air, her body stopped in the air and she could not take another step forward. Phantom Princess said angrily, "Let me go." The handsome man shook his head and said, "I can't let you go. If anything happens to you, I won't be able to explain it to father." He waved his hand and Phantom Princess flew into the cave. The handsome man casually set up a formation and said, "Calm down inside first. When the time is right, I will let you take revenge for Hu Jiao." "Let me out. Huan Yun, you bastard, let me out. Let me out. I curse you that you will never be able to marry a wife." Phantom Princess cursed loudly in the cave. The handsome man just shook his head helplessly and flew away. The news of Lady Hu Jiao's death at the hands of the heretical cultivation quickly spread throughout Thousand Fox City. The demon citizens in the city were all filled with righteous indignation. Some of them were rescued by Hu Jiao from the heretical cultivation. However, the news that came later made them even angrier. The heretical cultivation actually hung Lady Hu Jiao's corpse on the mountain gate and let it be exposed to the sun by the feng shui. This was a naked insult. For a moment, the citizens of Thousand Fox country were furious. They wanted nothing more than to flatten the heretical cultivation, but Meizong did not do anything. Those evil cultivators were too powerful. If the first elder didn't show up, even if they went, they would only be sending themselves to their deaths. In the cave on the highest peak of Thousand Fox Country, Phantom Princess gritted her teeth. I must kill them. At the entrance of the cave, a fox demon was telling her about the situation in Thousand Fox Country in the past 2 days. Then he remembered something and said, there is one more thing that I don't dare to guess. I don't know if I should tell Lady Phantom Princess. Phantom Princess took a deep breath and said, speak. The fox demon said, the snake demon we brought back last time has disappeared for 2 days. He should have left Thousand Fox City. He didn't tell anyone about this. Maybe he was afraid of death and ran away, Phantom Princess said coldly. If he wants to leave, then leave. Meizong doesn't matter with him. The next time we meet, we will be enemies. The fox demon said indignantly, this demon doesn't know how to repay kindness at all. If it wasn't for Lady Phantom Princess, he would still be a demon in human form. He might not be able to condense a demon core in this lifetime. Phantom Princess shook her head and said, don't mention him again. Think of a way to bring Hu Jiu's corpse back. There was a look of humiliation in the fox demon's eyes, but he still sighed and said, this is obviously bait. They insulted Hu Jiu's body to lure us there. There must be a trap set up there and they are waiting for us to come to them. The experts of the clan were killed and their corpses were exposed. These days Thousand Fox Country was extremely depressed. It had been a long time since the people from Meizong sect showed a smile. Hu Jiu was killed and there was a traitor in the sect. The snake demon had joined Meizong for less than a month and escaped from Thousand Fox Country. This was the shame of Meizong in recent years. I knew it. That snake demon is extremely cowardly. Who forced him to join the sect? It's Hu Jiu. Hu Jiu is silly. I know he took a fancy to the snake demon's beauty, but Meizong recruits not only based on beauty, but also character and temperament. A while ago he was still pretending to be fearless. Now he has shown his true colors, right? At the city gate of Thousand Fox City, the 2 experts of Meizong who guarded the city gate were still angry when they talked about the snake demon. At this moment, a figure slowly walked in from outside the city gate. It was a figure that was not tall. His clothes were tattered and his body was covered in blood. He limped from afar. Who is it? This is Thousand Fox Country. So, the 2 experts of Meizong flew forward, but in the next moment their expressions changed. At the city gate the person was carrying something on his back. He wrapped a vine around his waist and connected it tightly to the thing on his back. The 2 quickly saw the thing on his back. It was a corpse. When they saw the face of the corpse, the 2 exclaimed again. It's Hu Jiu. Hu Jiu's corpse. The figure walked over step by step. When he reached the city gate he slowly raised his head. Under the blood, a handsome and delicate face was revealed. He smiled at the 2 and said in a hoarse voice, I brought back brother Hu Jiu's corpse. After saying that he fell down. The 2 hurried forward to support him, their faces full of shock. It's him. He didn't escape. He actually brought back Hu Jiu's corpse. How did he do it? The 2 hurried back to the city with a man and a corpse. Not long after, a piece of news from Meizong made the entire Thousand Fox Country boil. Master Hu Jiu's corpse was brought back, and the person who brought it back was the little demon of Meizong who had defected for half a month. Soon everyone understood that he did not defect. Everyone in Thousand Fox Country wanted to bring back Hu Jiu's corpse, but no one took action because they knew that it was a trap that would kill whoever went. During these days they could only condemn and condemn. However, there was a demon who left Thousand Fox Country alone without saying anything. Half a month later, when he returned again, he had already brought back Hu Jiu's corpse and the dignity of Meizong and Thousand Fox Country. Although they did not know what happened in the past half a month, it was said that when the little demon carried Hu Jiu's corpse back to Thousand Fox City, there were nearly 100 wounds of various sizes on his body. He was like a lamp that had run out of oil and his life was hanging by a thread. If Lady Phantom Princess had not saved him with precious spirit pills, he would probably be dead now. That little snake demon caused a lot of discussion in the city. I want to apologize to him. A few days ago I scolded him for defecting. What a good man. He's a true hero, a hero worthy of everyone's admiration. That lord even took a bath in our bathhouse. He looks handsome and charming, but I didn't expect him to be so courageous. In Phantom Princess manner, countless figures stood in the courtyard. Many of their faces were still filled with disbelief. Unbelievable. Even the Grand Elder might not be able to escape unscathed from that place. How did a fourth realm little demon do it? I've never seen such serious injuries. What did he go through? He's still alive. What's supporting him? Everyone could not understand how a weak little demon could do such a big thing that even a sixth realm powerhouse would not be able to do easily. What happened in between? In the room, Li Mu opened his eyes and looked at the figure standing in front of the bed. He struggled to get up and said, "Greetings, Lady Phantom Princess." Phantom Princess pressed his shoulder and pressed him back on the bed. She said, "You're seriously injured and need to rest. There's no need to salute." Then she looked at Li Mu's face and asked, "How did you do it?" Li Mu's eyes were filled with sadness. He said, "Here Brother Hujio was the person who treated me the best. I couldn't watch his body be humiliated after he died. So I used the snake race's concealment technique and hid in front of the heretical cultivation for half a month before the 5 heretical cultivation powerhouses left." Phantom Princess shook her head and said, "Even so, you couldn't have gotten Hujio's body." Li Mu said, "I knew that there must be an ambush around Big Brother Hujio's body. If I fought head-on I would be courting death, so I could only use my wits. Therefore an hour after the 5 evil cultivators left, I changed into one of their appearances and tricked their subordinates into putting down Big Brother Hujio's body. Unfortunately I was still discovered in the end. It wasn't easy for me to kill my way out. Fortunately after the 5 evil cultivators left, there were no more 5th realm cultivators. Otherwise I wouldn't have been able to see Lord Phantom Princess." Phantom Princess blurted out, "That's impossible. The transformation technique requires at least a 6th realm cultivation. Even I don't know it. You can't have the Fulu and pills to disguise yourself." Li Mu looked at her and said gratefully, "I have to thank Lady Phantom Princess. It was you who helped me reach the 4th realm. At the same time I awakened a talent. Snakes don't have the ability to transform unless..." Phantom Princess looked at Li Mu with confusion. She quickly thought of something and said, "You have the bloodline of the lizard race?" Li Mu nodded and said, "My grandmother is from the lizard race." The lizard race was known as the 4-legged snake. The snake race and the lizard race often intermarried. Phantom Princess was no longer confused and said, "You shouldn't have acted on your own." Li Mu shook his head and said, "Even you were imprisoned. If I said that I was going to bring back Brother Hujio's body, I definitely wouldn't have been allowed." Phantom Princess asked, "Are you willing to give up your life for Brother Hujio's body?" Li Mu smiled and said, "My father told me that there are things that I shouldn't do in my life. I can't let Brother Hujio be humiliated because I'm afraid of death. Otherwise, even if I'm alive, I'll feel guilty. I didn't expect Little Snake to be so loyal." A shadow floated in from the outside and looked at Li Mu emotionally. She said, "I didn't love you for nothing. You're willing to die for my body. Are you also tempted by me?" Li Mu looked at the spirit that looked exactly like Hujio and his expression became sluggish. Phantom Princess explained, "Even though Hujio lost her body, her demon soul still managed to escape in the end." Hujio sighed and said with pity, "It's a pity that I didn't listen to Lord Phantom Princess's words. If I also cultivated a Dao technique and formed a primordial spirit, I could find a new body and be reborn. I wouldn't have turned into a ghost like this." She looked at Li Mu and asked, "Little Snake, you won't stop loving me because I've become a ghost, right?" Li Mu laid on the bed and struggled to raise his hand. He gave Hujio the middle finger and said, "Love your mother." After that he fainted again. Hujio was about to go forward when Phantom Princess waved her hand and said, "He almost died. Let him rest. He'll be of great use to me in the future. You can't have any ideas about him." Hujio's face was filled with resentment. She sighed and said, "I understand." After the human and ghost left, the door closed automatically. On the bed, Li Mu opened his eyes again. He exhaled softly and a smile appeared on his face. After spending a lot of time together, even if it was a dog, he would have some feelings for it. Putting aside the standpoint of race, these demons were actually more worthy of deep friendship than humans. He was very happy that Hujio's demon soul was still there. This time he took back Hujio's body. Although it was also to gain Phantom Princess's trust, it was more because of their friendship. This kind of ending could be said to be a happy ending. What he said to Phantom Princess was all true. Although Li Mu had the strength to break into the heretical cultivation sect and take Hu Jiao's body, after that he couldn't explain the process to Phantom Princess and the people of Meizong sect. Therefore he could only use a trick. He really hid near the heretical cultivation organization's nest for half a month, patiently waiting for the leader of the heretical cultivation to leave. He also really changed into the appearance of one of them to deceive their subordinates. But the flaw was deliberately exposed by Li Mu. If he easily carried Hu Jiao's body back, it would be too fake. It would be strange if Phantom Princess didn't suspect him. On the other hand, if he managed to snatch back the corpses of his compatriots, those who doubted him would feel ashamed. Li Mu didn't believe that Phantom Princess wouldn't let him be her personal guard after he risked his life so much. If he couldn't be promoted this time, Li Mu really couldn't do this job. The elixir that Phantom Princess gave him must be of heaven grade. He quietly rested in the room for 3 days. His injuries were almost healed. Not even a scar could be seen on his body. During these 3 days he had cute little fox demons serving him. These little fox demons that had just transformed looked at him with stars in their eyes. On the afternoon of the 3rd day, a little fox demon walked in and looked at Li Mu with admiration. She said softly, "Sir, Lord Phantom Princess invites you over." Li Mu got out of bed for the first time in 3 days and came to Phantom Princess's courtyard. In the courtyard, Phantom Princess sized up Li Mu and asked, "How's your recovery?" Li Mu cupped his fists and said, "It's almost done. Thank you for the elixir." Phantom Princess nodded and said, "Although you carried Hu Jiao's body back and made a great contribution, there are still many people in the sect who don't believe you can do it. So, I need you to show me your abilities. As long as you can prove that what you said is true, I won't let anyone who dares to criticize you go easily." Li Mu had already expected this and was not afraid. He used his sleeve to cover his face. After a moment, when he moved his sleeve away, he had already turned into Hu Jiao. Phantom Princess revealed a strange expression and said, "In a certain demon race, there is only 1 in 10,000 people who can awaken this level of innate ability. You are the first one I have seen." Actually, the innate abilities of the various demon races were not that hard to awaken. It was just that they did not know the method. If they knew the method, humans could also use demon techniques, but it was not as easy as the demon race. Li Mu changed back and looked at Phantom Princess and asked, "Lord Phantom Princess, is it done?" Phantom Princess nodded and said, "You can go back." Li Mu let out a sigh of relief. Just as he was about to leave, Phantom Princess suddenly thought of something and said, "Wait." Li Mu turned his head and asked, "Lord Phantom Princess, is there anything else?" Phantom Princess thought for a moment and pointed at the statue that was filled with sword marks beside the fake mountain and said, "Change into him for me to see." Li Mu looked at the statue and swallowed his saliva. He said softly, "Lord Phantom Princess, I have never seen him before. I'm afraid I can't change." Phantom Princess crossed her arms and said, "No problem, you can change." Li Mu probed, "Then I will try?" Phantom Princess nodded and said, "Let's begin." Li Mu covered his face with his sleeve again. After a moment he slowly moved his sleeve away. Phantom Princess walked over step by step and examined him for a long time. Finally she stretched out her hand and patted his face. She pulled it and revealed a meaningful smile and said, "Good, very good." Li Mu's face was pale and filled with fear. He said with a trembling voice, Lord Phantom Princess, don't be like this." Phantom Princess looked at this familiar face and a certain image appeared in her mind. She couldn't help but curl up her lips and reveal a smile that could charm all living things. She said, "From now on you can follow me." This means that Li Mu is already her personal guard and also her personal guard. Li Mu has taken a big step towards his final goal. He revealed a happy expression and said, "Thank you, Lord Phantom Princess." Phantom Princess thought for a moment and said, "I'll change your name. I'll call you that from now on." Li Mu bowed and said, "This subordinate will follow Lord Phantom Princess's arrangement." Phantom Princess pinched his face again and said, "Remember, from now on, you will be called Li Mu." Chapter 441. Li Mu would have thought that he had been discovered if Phantom Princess did not summon the elites of Meizong sect. Li Mu asked anxiously, "Lord Phantom Princess, can I leave now?" Phantom Princess looked at him and said, "You don't have to go back. From now on you will stay in the courtyard next to mine. I will summon you if I need anything." Li Mu was delighted. He did not know if he was closer to her psychologically, but at least he was closer physically. He was one big step closer to his final goal. He left Phantom Princess's place and went back to his room to pack his things. He met a few people from Meizong sect along the way. They all stopped and clenched their right fist and hit their left shoulder. This was a gesture of respect from Meizong sect. Li Mu had won their respect after hiding near the heretical cultivation organization for half a month and taking back the body of his fellow sect member. At this moment, there was a storm in a heretical cultivation organization. Trash, you can't even protect a body with dozens of people? Someone swaggered in, took away the demonic corpse and killed more than 10 people. What were you doing at that time? You trash, how dare you face me? An elder looked down furiously. Dozens of people knelt on the ground and did not dare to raise their heads. Master, it's not that we're incompetent, it's just that the thief is too cunning. As soon as you left, he pretended to be you and tricked the corpse away. Although we realized that something was wrong later, that thief is extremely good at hiding. We couldn't find him at all when he snuck into the forest. We split up to search, but he defeated us one by one and killed a few of us. Moreover, this person is not afraid of death, as if he doesn't care about his own life, exchanging injury for injury, exchanging life for life. He's very difficult to deal with. Cut the crap. An old man waved his hand and said, "This is a great humiliation, truly a great humiliation. Pass down my order. Anyone who can take that bastard's life will be rewarded with 1,000 spirit jades. Anyone who can capture him alive and bring him to me will be rewarded with 2,000 spirit jades." In Thousand Fox City, the spies of Meizong sect quickly found out about the heretical cultivation organization's kill order. 1,000 spiritual jades was a great temptation for cultivators below Realm 6, regardless of whether they were humans or demons. But at the same time, for the first time, they learned the details of this matter from the heretical cultivation. He had hidden for half a month just to wait for an opportunity. First, he cheated the trust of the heretical cultivation. After being discovered, he was besieged by the heretical cultivation. In the process of escaping, he even killed more than 10 heretical cultivation practitioners of the same level. What kind of fierce man was he? Just thinking about the process would send chills down the spines of those who were timid. In Li Mu's new residence, Hu Jiu floated in the air. She looked at Li Mu emotionally and said, "Little snake, I used to think you were timid and afraid of death. I want to apologize to you. You're a real tough guy, different from those pretty Xiaobai guys." Li Mu waved his hand and said, "I'm back now. In fact, I'm also afraid of death. So when I do things, I plan carefully. We snakes are cold-blooded and are born to be stealthy. The forest is my territory. If they dare to come in, they'll die." Hu Jiu sighed and asked, "So it's really not because of love?" Li Mu also said seriously, "I still like beautiful women. It won't change in my life." Hu Jiu said, "Who do you like? Tell me and I'll give up completely." Li Mu shook his head and said, "I can't tell you." Hu Jiu thought for a moment and suddenly said, "Is it Miss Phantom Princess?" Li Mu didn't deny it and said, "Big brother Hu Jiu, please help me keep it a secret." Hu Jiu sighed and said, "I knew it. Meizong sect, Thousand Fox City, know the entire demon nation. As long as they're capable, they don't like Miss Phantom Princess. But your love is destined to be fruitless. Unless you can capture Li Mu alive and bring him to Miss Phantom Princess and become the personal disciple of the Heavenly Monarch, then you'll have a chance." Li Mu clenched his fist and said, "I'll work hard." Hu Jiu left in disappointment. Li Mu closed the door and lay on the bed. Any female, no matter if she was a woman or a female demon, would find it hard to hate someone who liked her, even if she didn't like them. Not to mention someone like him who was handsome and loyal. In order to complete the mission earlier, Li Mu had to use all means to win Miss Phantom's favor. After lying down for a while, Miss Phantom's voice came from outside, "Li Mu, come here." Li Mu didn't move immediately. Instead, he waited for Miss Phantom to call him 3 times before he walked out of the room. He flew over the wall and landed in another courtyard. Miss Phantom frowned and asked, "What are you doing in the room? I've called you 3 times. Li Mu said apologetically, "I'm sorry, Miss Phantom. I haven't gotten used to this new name and didn't react immediately." Miss Phantom said, "Get used to it slowly." She threw a token to Li Mu and said, "From now on, you're my personal guard. Wherever I go, you follow." Li Mu stood with his chest out and said, "Yes." Miss Phantom said again, "Also, before you see me, you have to turn into that statue." Li Mu touched his head and asked in confusion, "Why?" Miss Phantom said indifferently, "There's no why. You just have to listen." Li Mu didn't say anything else. He used his sleeves to wipe his face and quickly turned into another face. Miss Phantom sized him up and waved her hand in the air. Li Mu's projection appeared in front of him. Miss Phantom said, "There's still a bit of difference. Take a closer look. It's best if you can make me look exactly the same." Li Mu revealed a troubled expression and said, I will try my best." 2 hours later. After numerous tests, Li Mu finally turned into something that Miss Phantom was satisfied with. Miss Phantom asked someone to bring him a set of clothes and said, "Change." Li Mu went back to change into a new set of clothes. His original sword was broken in the battle with the heretical cultivation. Miss Phantom also gave him a new one. The quality was better than the original. It was at least earth grade. When he stood in front of Miss Phantom again, she was stunned for a moment before she raised her hand and slashed at him. Li Mu covered his head with his hands and said in panic, "Miss Phantom, don't." The short sword in Miss Phantom's hand stopped when it was just a hair's breadth away from his neck. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She smiled and said, "Although your cultivation has increased, it's because of external items. Your strength and cultivation aren't compatible. From today onwards I will guide your cultivation every day. Now you can use the sword in your hand to attack me." At this moment the way Miss Phantom looked at him made Li Mu think of the Empress. Before she sparred with Li Mu, that was how she looked at him. Li Mu finally knew why Miss Phantom made him like this. She was using the excuse of guiding his cultivation to vent her anger. Although in her heart, Li Mu wasn't the Li Mu she hated, they looked the same, so she felt good beating him up. This meant that he became her scapegoat. At this moment, Li Mu wanted to retaliate angrily, but in the next moment he thought of Han Xen, Go Jian and Ultraman. A great man knows when to yield and when not to. If you can't bear small things, you can't get a fox without entering the fox's lair. For the heavenly book, for the secrets of Maison, he endured. Li Mu took a deep breath and looked at Miss Phantom seriously. He said, "Miss Phantom, I'm sorry." He stabbed with his sword and shouted, "Take this." The 2 swords in Miss Phantom's hands were replaced with 2 whips. She whipped Li Mu and said, "Too slow. Still too slow. There are too many flaws. That's it. How did you kill your way out of those people?" Li Mu gritted his teeth and persevered. The Phantom Princess did not suppress her dermic powers at all. It was obvious that she was bullying him. However, Li Mu could only bear with it. He would remember this in his heart. Once he obtained the heavenly book and found out about the Maison sect's spy in the fairies' capital, he would return the whip he received today many times over. Outside the door, Hu Jiu looked at the scene in the courtyard from afar. She shook her head and said, "Is this love?" The fox demon beside her whispered, "How can you bully a demon like this? Miss Phantom is too much." 7 days passed in the blink of an eye. In these few days, Li Mu accepted Miss Phantom's actions and didn't complain at all. Although his body was humiliated, Miss Phantom would reward him with some recovery pills and various magic treasures after each session. The people of Maison pitied him at the beginning, but later on, they were only envious. A few days later, Miss Phantom seemed to be embarrassed. Looking at the silent Li Mu, she waved her hand and said, "Forget it, I won't practice today." She sat on the stone bench and said, "Come and massage my shoulders." In a bathhouse in Thousand Fox City, mist lingered. In the soundproof array, Li Mu was reporting to the Empress. In the distant Chang'e Palace in Fairy's capital, Zhou Yi, who was leaning on the dragon throne, sat up straight and said angrily, "What? She bullied you and even asked you to massage her shoulders. I didn't even let you massage me." But she suddenly stood up and slammed the table in front of her. The heavy wooden table was shattered into pieces. Zhou Yi's chest heaved up and down. She gritted her teeth and said, "Damn that fox, I'm so angry." Chapter 442. Thousand Fox City. Hu Jiu, who had lost her physical body and switched to the path of ghost, was chatting with several companions. "Have you guys noticed that Lady Illusion Princess seems to be a little different recently? You noticed it too? I thought it was just my imagination." "It's not your imagination. Lord Phantom Princess likes to smile more recently, and her complexion is much better than before. She looks like those young ladies who have been nourished." "Shut up. Is Lord Phantom Princess someone you can talk about?" Hearing Hu Jiu's angry rebuke, everyone obediently shut their mouths. They looked at a certain limping figure walking out of Lord Phantom Princess's residence with envy on their faces. Lord Phantom Princess has never treated anyone like this before. She would give Little Snake a lot of rewards every time. His wealth is now richer than ours. Yesterday she even gave Little Snake a heavenly flask treasure. Even we don't have this kind of treasure. If we really fight, we might not be his match. Little Snake exchanged his body for this. Look at how badly he is trampled by Lord Phantom Princess every time. This is nothing. If he is willing, I can exchange it with him. That depends on Lord Phantom Princess. Li Mu had already become Phantom Princess's personal guard. She would reward him with some good things every day, but he still could not come into contact with the heavenly book. Over the past few days he had never missed a single mission. All the humiliation he had suffered at the hands of Phantom Princess had been avenged by the evil cultivators. With the treasures that Phantom Princess gave him, Li Mu could unleash even more power. When they encountered danger, he would always rush to the front. When everyone retreated, he would also take the initiative to stay behind and cut off their escape route. When he fought, he would lose 800 of his own men and 1,000 of his enemies. His actions of exchanging injuries for lives gradually won him the respect of everyone. Recently, everyone had changed the way they addressed him from Little Snake to Lord Li. Not only did Phantom Princess change his name, but she also let everyone in Meizong sect call him that. From the beginning to the end, Li Mu did not wait for these people to call him Daniel Wu. Li Mu was extremely disdainful of Phantom Princess's self-comforting behavior. Instead of going to Fairy's capital to seek revenge, she chose to lie to herself and others. What kind of hero was she? If she had the ability, she would have a fair fight in the future. Li Mu would let her have a good taste of what he was feeling now. Outside, the bell rang again. When Li Mu arrived at the front courtyard, he discovered that many experts had gathered here. Taking a closer look, weren't they the experts from Meizong sect and Mirage sect that Huanji had brought to White Emperor's cave mansion the last time? Among the 10 demonic Dao sects, the Mirage sect and the Meizong sect were both controlled by the 10,000 Illusion Lord. This lineup already included half of the experts of the two sections. After seeing these people, Li Mu understood Phantom Princess's goal. The Heavenly Fox clan was a clan that repaid kindness and revenge. It was not the Heavenly Fox's style to not take revenge after suffering such a huge loss last time. She would always remember this matter in her heart, and even her cultivation would be affected. She had gathered these experts for the sake of revenge. Among the 12 people other than Li Mu, the others were all 5th realm. However, these 5th realm experts did not look down on Li Mu at all. In the past few days, Li Mu had used practical actions to prove that he could do what 5th realm experts could do. He could even do better. He could also do things that 5th realm experts could not do. Although his cultivation was not very high, his fearless spirit was impressive. Suspended in the void, Phantom Princess said coldly, "Let's go." Dozens of figures broke through the void and flew out of the Thousand Fox country. Several hours later, whoosh, Li Mu cut down a heretical cultivation expert with a sword. He looked at the distant sky. There were waves of intense dermic power fluctuations. Their opponents this time were very strong. They were the 5 leaders of a heretical cultivation organization. The 5 of them were twins. After cultivating, their minds were connected and they cooperated very well. When the 5 of them worked together, they could fight against 6th realm experts with 5th realm cultivation. Their strength was also at the top of the heretical cultivation organization. This was also the reason why Phantom Princess did not take revenge last time. Within the Yao Nation, 6th realm experts could not easily attack. Even someone as strong as Meizong sect could not do anything to this heretical cultivation organization. Phantom Princess took a long time to gather these experts again. She wanted to avenge her past humiliation and take revenge. It was not without reason that the 5 brothers could occupy a place in the Yao Nation. When the 5 brothers worked together, they cooperated very well. Phantom Princess had gathered 10 Meizong sect experts, but they were only evenly matched. With Li Mu's current cultivation, he naturally could not participate in a battle of this level. Otherwise, Phantom Princess and the others would definitely be suspicious. In this heretical cultivation base, other than the 5 leaders, the underlings could not participate in a battle of this level. They all surrounded Li Mu. Now, even if Li Mu was at the 4th realm and had the Dharma treasure given to him by Phantom Princess, he was not afraid of 5th realm cultivators. Killing these evil cultivators was like chopping vegetables. It's him. He's the one who snatched the corpse last time. Retreat. Although the appearance was different, the feeling that the person gave them was definitely not wrong. The heretical cultivation group quickly recognized that the person in front of them was the terrifying existence who barged into their base alone not long ago, snatched the fox demon's corpse and killed more than 10 of their brothers along the way. After realizing this, the heretical cultivation group that was abnormally fierce immediately retreated in fear. Li Mu was about to give chase when he suddenly stopped in his tracks. He raised his eyebrows and a surprised expression appeared on his face. Then a powerful aura exploded from the ground. Judging from this aura, it was actually another 5th realm expert and his strength should be at the peak of 5th realm. His cultivation was much higher than Phantom Princess's. Then the ground cracked open somewhere and a figure broke through the air. When he saw that figure, Li Mu was stunned. This person's appearance was exactly the same as the 5 leaders of this heretical cultivation organization. In the sky, the experts of the 2 sects were stunned and immediately revealed shocked expressions. Why is there another one? Oh no, there's 6 brothers. Damn it, it's a trap. That elder did not help the other 5. Instead, he looked at Li Mu with a sinister gaze and gritted his teeth. So it's you. As soon as he finished speaking, his figure had already disappeared from the spot. Li Mu did not hesitate to slap a Fulu note on himself and escape into the distance. Where he originally stood, the elder's skinny hand reached out. If Li Mu was still there, his hand would have pierced through his heart. You can't escape. The elder's attack did not succeed. He coldly snorted and chased after Li Mu. In the sky, Phantom Princess's expression changed. Just as she was about to chase after him, an elder blocked her and sneered. Little beauty, it's already like this and you're still thinking about others. Take care of yourself first, Phantom Princess coldly said. Scram. The elder did not reply, but his attacks became even fiercer. Phantom Princess coldly looked at him and crushed a jade talisman in her hand. Suddenly, a shadow appeared behind her. It was a huge scarlet fox. The scarlet fox shadow was 1,000 feet long and had 7 tails behind it. After the scarlet fox shadow appeared, it entered Phantom Princess's body. The 5 elders looked at Phantom Princess, who was emitting a terrifying aura with fear in their eyes. They suddenly had a feeling that a great disaster was about to befall them. At the same time in the forest, a figure was quickly escaping. Behind him, a stream of light was chasing closely. The distance between the two was constantly closing. Let me see how long your Fulu can last. You dare to kill my disciple. In a moment I will extract your soul and refine your body into a corpse. I won't kill your soul. I will let you suffer the pain of your soul being burned by the nether fire every day. The power of the Fulu was limited. The Fulu on Li Mu's body was constantly fading. His speed also gradually slowed down. The elder used his Fa Li and suddenly sped up. His skinny hand viciously grabbed at Li Mu's neck. However, in the next moment he suddenly felt extreme fear from the bottom of his heart. His body instantly retreated as he looked at Li Mu with uncertainty. Li Mu's body had already stopped. He floated in the air. He turned his head and looked at the elder. His expression was strange as he said, "There's something." The elder looked at Li Mu with fear. Just a moment ago he suddenly felt a strong sense of danger. This was related to the cultivation technique he cultivated. His cultivation technique allowed him to sense danger the moment before it arrived. He felt this feeling from many experts. A moment ago he had actually sensed the same danger from this low-level demon. However, no matter how he looked at it, this person was just a 4th-level demon. He was shocked and asked in a low voice, "What exactly are you?" Li Mu looked left and right. After confirming that they had flown far away and that there was no one around, he said calmly, "That's enough." In the air, a huge bell suddenly appeared. Under the elder's terrified gaze, it covered his head.